Let me introduce John. John Carlton. His reputation precedes him. Most people in the wonky world of marketing that we live in know who John is. He's a little bit famous now. But 3 years ago or so, something like that, 3 years ago, he wasn't so famous. And I remember I kind of got long story, but I got introduced to John, and he was just starting to not be a hermit anymore. And John, you had this lifestyle of like writing copy for 6 months and then going and hanging with your band or it was the biker crowd or something. And you decided to hang out your shingle and be a guru. And at the time, my business was pretty new, and I was pretty wobbly in the copywriting department. And I signed up for your Insiders Club, and you slapped me around real hard, and I kept at it, and it really immensely helped me. It made me much more solid, and really got me over the hump.
Fun. I helped you with a headline to go refund, did I?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, real early on, I changed some on my homepage, and all of a sudden I doubled my opt-ins, and and away you go.
You did one of the smartest things I've ever had a insider do, and I still reference you, not by name, but it's your example that I reference. When I tell people that just sometimes you just got to start over. It's not that you wrote a bad letter; it's that the pitch wasn't right. You were doing a little too much educating. You were off on tangents. You're doing things. And you were the first guy that I really said, you really just need to trash what you got here and start over from the top. And it's not that hard. It's one of the hardest things for a rookie writer to do is to throw away everything they've written. It's like, I got 12 pages I wrote. I can't throw it away. It's like throwing out the baby with the bathwater. But in fact, when you rewrote the thing, it happened much faster because you'd already gone through that territory you needed to go through. You had all the benefits in mind. Your UST is much more clear. And that letter you wrote after you trashing the one that you had there for a while is either still the one you're using or was the one that you used for a couple of years, right?
Oh, yes. Well, I'll tell you what that is. That's really the first product that I started selling, which is if you go to my homepage, you see this thing about guerrilla marketing for high-tech salespeople, and you request a CD, and a sales letter gets mailed out with it. And it was that sales letter. And I was basically at that point, I was breaking even. I was selling a $700 product, and it was costing me $700 just to acquire a customer, which, I wasn't real happy about that. And so I sent that into you, and you said, you got to rewrite this whole thing. And I'm like, nope. But I did. I stayed up all night, and it doubled the response. And I remember specifically that it was September of 2002. So it was like exactly 3 years ago. Or I got to October, and I calculated my numbers for September, and it was like, hey, I'm making money now. Now I can crank up this engine a little harder, and I'll make more. And that was getting over the hump, which really, if you want to boil it down, that's what this whole coaching program is about, is getting over that hump. And yeah, I had written something. I had friends that thought it was great copy and everything, but Sean's like, no, you're not, like, your head's all over the place. You're not focusing down on the simple thing that people want here. You're confusing them with all this extraneous crap, and yeah, rewrite it. And it was a great thing. And that's why, well, that's why I've got you coaching the gold and iridium guys here, because that's what people need.
My theme song, if I ever get around to writing it, will be "It's fun when it works," isn't it?
A lot of fun when it works.
Yeah, and it's like it just makes me really happy when somebody. I have a lot of insiders that have been with me for a long time, but a lot of these guys struggle really, really hard because, unlike rat in a lab rats in a maze, they will only go down a blind alley once or twice, and then they don't go down that blind alley anymore. And that's how they work their way through a maze to find the food. Humans, however, often will just stay in the first blind alley they walk down, sit down, and stay there for the rest of their lives.
Oh man, how true.
Out of cajoling or even trying to force them out of there will get them to budge. We're just very, very stubborn people. And even when you pay for advice and you realize that the advice you're given is good and all this stuff, it's very, very difficult to do what you did. That's why what you did was you were the first student I told that. You were the first student to follow through on that. And, it's an act of courage to throw away all this work you had done, because you had your entire life invested in that piece of writing. I mean, it's not just for a veteran writer like me. I write a piece, it's my 1000th and 13th piece. It's no big deal if I have to rewrite it, or I don't care what happens to it, really. For you, it's your first big piece. It's your business. You're off on your own. You're doing things. It's everything to you.
Yeah.
So to jettison it and start over and do that is an act of courage. And that's often the first thing that happened. You talk about getting over the hump. I mean, it's getting out of the maze. It's not just finding a better path in the maze. It's not just backing out of that blind alley you're in. It's actually finding the way out of the maze and starting a whole new world where you're not in mazes anymore, because suddenly it's not guesswork anymore. It's not, well, I'll try this and then I'll try this. It's like, oh, okay, I'll just plow straight ahead, because with you were smart enough to hang out with Dan Kennedy. You know all about Gary Halbert. Did you find me through Dan?
Actually, I found you on the IC list because
there you go.
I was trying to find somebody to talk about, how crappy ad agencies are for my product, and this guy named John Carlton responded and goes, "Yeah, I'm the guy that used to sneak in the back door in the LA ad agencies when the guy couldn't crack the code, and I would write the letter for him, and I could tell you all kinds of, stories about."
Well, think about that. You're looking for information. So this is just a climb lesson. I mean, you are a living example of how to do this right. You have to admit to yourself that you're a rookie and you need some help. I mean, that is a huge thing for a lot of people to do. So that's like step one. Step two is to start identifying that help and not necessarily jump on stuff just because somebody stands up and says they're an expert. In other words, going to an agency, it's like going to a car dealer and telling the car dealer, I need a new car. Please sell me the best car for my needs. And what's he going to do? He's going to say, well, I'm going to sell you the best car for my needs, which is the biggest profit, and it's not necessarily going to be a car you like. And I may try to get the most dog car off the lot, if they're going to be easy like that. So you have to apply some critical thinking to this. And you went through all of this and you started looking for things, and you didn't even know what you were looking for. You only knew that what you had found or that what was available was not right. That was, you had some experience with some agencies. You came from a corporate background. You knew that there were some things wrong, but you weren't exactly sure what the end product was going to look like. The rant I just wrote about was all about this. It's a huge thing for people to just say, I'm going to look for something. I don't even know what the end product's going to look like. I don't even know what my life's going to look like when I find it. I don't know how I'm going to identify it, but I'm going anyway. And that's like facing the unknown in a huge way. And it takes guts. But not that much guts. That's the big secret in entrepreneurial activities that a lot of people don't understand. It does take guts, but don't quit your day job and then go try to find an entrepreneurial gig. You don't have to search on the web. Find something that kind of works and kind of works your way into it. But the thing is, that's that move into it. It's fun when it works, because once it works, you have found a formula, probably, and unless you absolutely luck into it, but if you're tracking down good information, there are formulas out there to follow that take away most of the guesswork.
So I want to add something else is that...
And actually, I think that answers all the questions we had, and thank you and good night.
Well, a couple things is I know that people are always very timid about sending critiques to somebody because they're very invested in it. I'd spent weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, months writing this, and it was, the whole product I was selling really encapsulated the last 4 years of my life, and, this company I grew and how I did it. And, so it was just like you said, I had all this invested in it. And, when I send you a critique, there's part of me that goes, oh, I want John to write me back and say, wow, Perry, that was the best sell letter I've ever seen. Where can I buy your thing? Right. But if you said that,
Coffee.
what?
I'm still trying to write my own piece that I will look at 2 days later and say, wow, that's just the best piece I've ever written. I've never had that reaction. I always am highly critical of myself. There's always ways to make it better. That's why deadlines are so important, by the way. Because without deadlines, you don't know when to quit. Writers like me who knows that editing and finessing and doing things will keep making things a little bit better. You have to have some kind of deadline in mind. You have to, and a deadline will force you to get started, get you over that hump. A lot of people, I'll bet, I haven't looked at all the questions you sent me today, but I'll bet there's some questions in about getting started and about, getting over the hump of just facing that blank page, And a lot of it has to do with just deadlines. I trick myself all the time. If I don't have a deadline for a project, I'll procrastinate till the last minute. So even pros and veterans, have the problem that rookies that seem to self-rookies, and we just find tricks around it, ways around any problem. That's the mantra you need to come away with. When you're doing coaching with guys like Perry who really understand what's going on. That's the mantra you need to keep in mind. In the back of your mind, understand that there's a way around every single problem. Maybe you don't want to hear the answer that you're going to get, or you're going to have 3 options and you don't like any of them. But the fact is, when you're dealing with people who understand what's happening, you're not guessing anymore. You're not flailing about. So there's always a way through a problem. And again, it may not be the answer you want. It may, because it may involve just saying, no, you got to drop this, or go do something else. But there is a way out of everything. You're never trapped.
Well, I knew that that there was a way, and I also knew that the best value I could get out of John was to tell him, be ruthless. Like, okay, don't sugarcoat this. Tell me what you really think. And then you told me what you really think. And then I wrote you back and I said, is there anything else? And then I got another half page of, well, yeah, actually there is. And I think it's always good to look for that corrective input, even if it's uncomfortable. That's how you grow. And I wasn't messing around. I had a wife. I had 3 kids. I quit my job. I was out on my own, and there was no time to mess around. So, John, tag me if you have to, but let's get this over with. And so, after a while, I get to where I've got this little John Carlton alter ego in my head. And when I get done writing something, I already know what he's probably going to say the first time. So then I can rewrite it. And then I send it to John, and, then it works. So,
this is just to finish this thought there, which is very important for everybody out there listening. My first experience with a hard-nosed editor was with Gary Halbert. It was the first piece I wrote for him, and he threw the first draft back at me across the desk. He didn't have constructive comments. He literally threw 18 pages back at me from across the desk and said, go back, put some empathy into this damn thing, and don't come back until you fixed it. And I didn't know him very well at the time, and I was really. I wasn't outraged, but I sat back and I thought, I'm a little angry at this. I've never been treated as this before. I'd always been a freelancer, working with agencies, working with the largest mailers in the world, Phillips and Agora, things like that. I had earned my chop. I was ghostwriting for some of the top writers in the world, like Jim Rudd, Steve Barwick. But I had made a vow to myself when I started out, 4 years prior to that, and that was I wasn't going to take any of this personally, and it was going to be business before pleasure and business before anything else. I was going to take whatever medicine was offered me, and I had sought Halbert out because I figured out after all this time that he was the guy that I needed to learn from. I said, fine. So I would. I didn't mentor under him very, very long. That first letter I wrote 17 versions of that letter. The 16th version, I didn't show him the last 11 versions or so because I kept looking at them with my own critical inner editor, as you just talked about. Now, my inner editor isn't isn't Halbert, doesn't look like him. I don't think I could live with myself with an image like that in my head. But it is a very, very stern version of myself who just says, come on, and doesn't let anything get by, and is just the most stern taskmaster you can imagine. And the 16th version that I wrote was the worst of the lot. It was rambling, it was all over the place, and I sat down and tossed it and wrote a 17th version, and that 17th version of the letter mailed for like 3 years and brought in millions and millions of dollars.
Wow.
If I had stopped at number 8 or 9 or 10, and all this took place over a few days, what I did was I went home and I just dedicated myself. I said, I'm gonna do whatever it takes to break through whatever is wrong and what I'm trying to do in this pitch, because I was doing something wrong. It was actually going to the diet market, which was the first time I went to the diet market, and there's a certain amount of empathy and a certain way to go to that market that you can't understand on your own. You can't sit down and say, well, I know how to go to the auto supply market, or I know how to go to, women's lingerie market, or to the cosmetic market, or any other market. The diet market has its own unique needs that need to be met before you're going to break through all the clutter, all the other advertising out there, all the noise, all the natural reluctance and resistance in the recipient's mind. And there's a whole special way of writing to that, and it involves more empathy than writers are used to doing. And you can't just come on and say, I understand how you feel. You can't do that. It has to be kind of smooth and hidden and professional, essentially. And it took me several days of solid, hardcore writing to reach that point. And like I say, once I reached it, I knew it. With that 17th version, I didn't go in and say, hey, how do you like this? I went in and threw it back to Gary and said, here it is, mail it, something. So when you talk about having your own internal little John Carlton, I mean, I don't want to hear people, coming back saying I'm inside their head wandering around. I think that's just creepy. But it's not a bad idea. It's not a bad idea to, if you're not looking at it right, make sure it's kind of a Zen thing. You got to step back out of yourself, because you can't be happy with the writing. You can't be happy that you actually sat down for 4 days and wrote a letter. You can't be happy that, it looks pretty polished. You've got to look at this thing with the eyes of the most vicious, reluctant, skeptical reader there is, which, by the way, is going to be your average prospect. They don't want your letter to arrive in their mailbox, or they don't want your ad to arrive in their magazine or newspaper. They don't want your email to pop up in their in basket. They don't want your site to come across the computer. They're not looking for something else to do. What they are looking for is maybe a solution to a problem. And even if you have the solution to the problem, they're still going to resent the fact that you are stirring some adrenaline inside of them. You're stirring desire and want and need. And it's kind of a resentful thing, because now you represent a problem. If you give them copy that makes them just sit up and say, oh my God, I really want that, then yes, they are in a state of desire and a state of hopefully action where they're going to get the wallet out. But they also kind of hate you at the back of their head, because now you have forced them to give their credit card information out, so either online or they're calling in an order, or they're writing a check and mailing it in, or whatever it is you've asked them to do. And now they got to wait a little bit. Even if they're doing it, downloading an ebook, they got to wait a few minutes. They got to do this. It's going to take a little time. Then they get this 56-page ebook, or this product arises. You presented a new problem in their life, and so they're going to kind of not like you very much. So you have to get used to it, because you are presenting a sharp left turn in their lives. I mean, their lives are just cruising down. Maybe they got these problems, they have these needs, they have things that need solutions, and then you come along, and if you do your job right, you are just sending them careening off the road they're on onto another road that you have created that they didn't even know existed before they opened your email or your letter.
As you just said, that is the challenge that everybody's gotta live up to, because you're going down the highway and you make them turn.
Right.
But of course, the trick is they have to feel like, wait, I didn't want to go down this highway. I want to go here. Right?
There's, as you know, Fred, because you have some psychological training, there's just there's a lot of psychological stuff going on that is unconscious. That's on a buying decision is irrational at its core and at its end. No matter. Mark Twain famously said there's 2 reasons why a man buys things. One is the reason he'll give you, and the second is the real reason he bought it. The most obvious obvious version of that is the guy with the midlife crisis buying the Porsche. He won't tell you he's buying the Porsche because he's having a midlife crisis most of the time. But the real reason he's buying it has nothing to do with the value of the car or the styling or anything like that. He buys it because it makes him feel a little younger. Excuse me. And he wants to get, he wants to have young girls on the sidewalk, turn their heads and see who that guy in the brand new, Boxster is. And that's the most obvious version. But even when you get down to buying nails from Home Depot, I mean, you go there, you got 15 choices of nails to buy. I mean, something's got to click in your head. And even though there's not a lot of advertising going on for nails, you make the choice. How does that choice get made? A lot of times, unless you're a carpenter, you're going to make kind of a irrational or emotional decision when you're doing it. And this is for almost everything that gets bought. You're sitting there looking at all these options, and that's the problem with capitalism is it's the opposite of communism. We have these. It's the kind of problem you want as a consumer. It's people get frozen up by choices. If they don't have a clear choice, then they've got to go deep inside and make some reason, up. So you as the advertiser, jump into that void and give them the reason they need to be able to buy this, so that they can go home and when the wife says, "What did you buy this for?" They have a ready answer for it. You kidding? This was the best in the country. This was touted as #1 by Consumer Reports. Or this was the one that was, 9 out of 10 experts recommend this product. You have an answer to that, even though the reason you bought it may be you like the color, or it made you feel good or look younger or whatever. And again, I think I've answered almost every question.
You do a lot of critiques and you coach a lot of, brand new people out of the gates. But you talk about, all right, if John's going to go push their reset button and help them unlearn all the stuff they think they know and point them in the right direction, this is John Carlton Boot Camp 101. What does that consist of?
How to go from the zero to becoming somewhat effective, you mean?
Yeah, maybe even respectably effective.
Well, you go the long route, and flail and test and do a lot of things, and that'll take you a couple of years. Or you can just shortcut it, and the easy way is as we said, just get a hold of somebody who's already been down that path and ask them. I like to think about the promised land as being on the other side of this mountain range from you. And as a rookie, you're looking at this mountain range, and it's not an easy climb. And you can just dive in and scramble up and try to make your way across and cut your own paths and stuff. And most of the times, if you keep at it, you're going to do it. It may just take you a long time, but why not? If there's a guy standing there that you trust and know, he says, well, you can go that way or that way or that way, or I can show you this secret tunnel that goes under the mountain range, and it'll instead of spending 5 days or 5 years climbing over it, I can get you through here in 15 minutes. Then you definitely want to take the shortcut, okay? And back when I was a rookie writer, trying to figure out how to go from not understanding how to sell something to becoming a master salesman in print, which is what a copywriter is. There wasn't a lot of options out there. Most of the books that we all take for granted now, tested advertising methods, Todd Hopkins books, things like that, they were all out of print. I still have some beat up, dog-eared Xerox copies of some of the older books, that I had. They were, fourth generation Xeroxes. You could barely read them, but they were such precious commodities because they explained a few of the secrets of things. Just finding Claude Hopkins books were just a revelation to me. They were written in the 20s, 1920. So the first thing to do when you're going to go from zero to wherever you need to go is just stock up on information, and not just any information, but the right information. And thank God there's all this. All these shortcuts out there. I mean, you don't have to come to me. You don't have to come to anybody in particular. There's a lot of good experts out there. Unfortunately, there's also a lot of charlatans out there. There's a lot of false experts out there. I always have to chuckle when I see somebody that I know personally out there touting themselves as an expert. I think, oh, God, he's getting, he learned everything that he knows from me, and he's really not that good yet. So why is he touting himself as an expert? But you don't need to do that right now. I'm sure that Dan Kennedy is on his third retirement. kind of like a Rolling Stones reunion tour, but he's going to retire sometime. Howard's going to retire sometime. I'm looking at retirement down the road. So right now you're in a golden age, and whether you go to Dan or Gary, Gary's got free stuff online. I've got some free stuff online. My blog's online. The information's out there. So first step to do is just load up. There's a lot of information. Go to Michael Fortin's copywriters boards, where the guys are going back and forth. Just to find out what other guys are finding out. Ask ask what other copywriters are reading or what courses that they tried. And make an investment in getting the right information, best information, and making sure that your foundation is solid. And then it's a matter of putting getting back in the car out of the garage and putting some miles on it. Just write some things. Writers write, and writing is the food and sustenance of your marketing campaign. If you don't do the writing, you're going to have to hire somebody to do it because nothing happens till the copy gets written. So, as I recommend, and Terry, as you are a shining example, when you do your own writing, you're in control of the main engine of your growth, your profit, and your business. So even if you hire someone, I'm not sure if you have, but if you do hire someone, you already know what to look for. You're not guessing, or you're not wondering if the expert that you just hired knows what he's doing, because you already know how to write copy. So understanding copy kind of solves all your problems. Because to understand copy, you have to understand salesmanship, you have to understand some form of marketing, because you have to understand what market you're going for, what kind of vehicles you can use, email, direct mail, print, and magazines and newspapers. You have to understand how to reach them, where to find them, what their needs are, the demographics. And once you know all this stuff, basically the USP, you can then go back and look at your product if you already have it and say, well, the product doesn't really stack up, but I need to change the product. Or you can say, oh, okay, now I see how my product fits into this market, which is a happier, situation for especially the other days. And then it's a matter of just going for it, just starting to pay attention, and also stay clued in to your market. Talk to as many of them as you can. Ask them questions, this very thing you're doing here, asking, finding out what really is on people's minds rather than sitting back and guessing, solves a whole lot of problems that expensive marketing paradigm don't solve. You could test for a year and not find out that the simple question everybody wanted was, are you shipping in a plain, box, or do I have to sign for it at the door so I don't want the wife to know that I ordered it? That helped. I might have got off tangent a little bit. George, all right. Yeah, exactly. So that's the best thing to do. Is just immerse yourself. I talked about rookies standing on the edge of the pool, afraid to jump in and bothering everybody who's already in the pool with all these silly questions like, is the water cold? How deep is this? Is the chlorine going to sting my eyes? Are you having fun? People. You're not going to get the right answer, because the only answer is jump in the pool. Gird thy loins, stay close to the edge, put on your little water wings if you have to, and jump in. And just start, it's like ready, fire, aim. Now, I don't think you need to say that, that's something you should tattoo on your arm and live by, because you're going to want to get to the point where it's ready, aim, fire, there's a lot to be said for understanding your market, getting everything ready before you get going. But at the very start, there's nothing wrong with ready, fire, and then aim. As long as, and that's what's so great about the web, like with email and putting up a website, you're not spending a lot of money. You're not spending $60,000 for a full page ad in Time magazine, to test an idea. You don't need to do that. You can test very, very cheaply. Google AdWords I come to you for advice on Google. So, it's just not that expensive. For essentially spare change, you can do what used to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars in testing. And testing will answer so many of your questions. And you need to stop thinking that you can guess what's right or what needs to be done. You can't, especially as a rookie. You will be constantly astonished at what you discover when you go through the paradigm of good testing of ideas in marketing.
Okay. When you get sale letter that people send you,
I get what?
When people send you a sale letter, they send you a link to their website or whatever, and you Well, what's number one on your list? What's number two on your list? And can you talk about how you judge that, and then how I as a writer should be thinking when I sit down? I get a bunch of questions here that basically have to do with, all right, what do I gotta have in my head when I sit down and start to bang out some copy? What's first?
That's really pretty easy, and I've lately just really started thinking about it in a way. It's and it's one of the advantages of doing so many critiques is I start to understand myself how the process is done, and really. It's not so much three questions. Basically, have a conversation with your reader. What would you say to a guy if you sat down with him face to face and all he has done is says, I'm a little interested in what you got, and that's all you know. And a lot of times you don't even know that, especially if you're mailing cold, to a cold list or emailing cold. You don't even have that. You haven't even raised your hand. But you're going to even a weak opt-in list. The guy has raised his hand, or he comes to your website because he Googled it, or there's some reason that brought him to your site, or that made him open your envelope or look at your ad in the magazine. So you got a little bit interested in it. So imagine that instead of writing to somebody, you're talking to somebody. How would you approach that conversation? And generally, what you would say in that conversation is what your pitch should be. And this helps with a lot of the tangents and a lot of things. What rookies tend to do is they say, and they even say in the copy, they say, please sit back. This is going to take me a few minutes to explain. Get comfy, have a little drink, sit back, and I'm going to take you on a story about how to buy nails. It's like, it just doesn't happen. Readers they don't have time. They're rushed. And again, they really don't want you to come into their life. They're not looking. They didn't wake up today and say, oh my God, I hope I get a really long ad in my email inbox so I can spend 15 minutes reading and finding out what this guy has to say. That's not the case. And imagine the person that you're having this conversation with. Imagine looking at their eyes and knowing when they're getting bored, when they're wondering what the hell you're talking about, when you're off on some tangent. You can tell because they're getting itchy and they want to get up and walk away. And you can't stop them from walking away. So think about that conversation that you would have. And that's the most important thing you can do, because that forces you to stay in the reader's pocket. And that's what you need to do. Now, if you're going cold at somebody and sitting down and they have opted in, or they've raised their hand, they said, I'm kind of interested in this. You sit down and you don't know anything about them, and you start saying, I know exactly what you're thinking. I'll bet your business is blah, 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 and you're having employee problems, and you're trying to double profit and stuff. You're risking the guy just saying, no, and turning around and walking away. If he says no at any point, if you bore him at any point, if you make him scratch his head and wonder what the heck you're talking about at any point, you've lost him. He's gone. He's going to turn around and talk to somebody else and walk away. Okay? There is a seduction process going on here. And you have to understand as much as you can about that person. So you can call out to fan leadership. If you talk to somebody and you say, hey, I have an insurance product here that I'd like to sell you, and you start talking about yourself and the insurance products all off the, from a list of features and benefits that you have, he may not be interested. He may be interested. He may not be interested, but he's not going to be riveted to what you say. If you know anything about this guy, and you don't say, "Hey, I know that you own that you're worried about your mortgage." You don't get into his head. You don't tell him you know what he's thinking, but you say, "I know you just bought a mortgage, and I know that the mortgage that you're paying is 3 points higher than the national average, and you might not know that, or something like that, and some information about him, or that." He's been in the business, or you just know his name. That's why I urge personalization as much as possible. When you personalize a letter or an email or anything, you're going to bump response by 30% or more, just by the simple act of saying "Hi, Fred" or "Dear Fred" instead of "Dear friend." And I hope they came through. I said Fred, "Dear Bob" instead of "Dear friend." Just by the simple act of personalization helps. In direct mail, it will bump response up to 30%. Now, in emails, I can't give you numbers because it's still too new, but it's the same process that goes on. There's a process of personalization as close as you can get to saying, "Hi, Bob. Listen, I just drove by your business down on the corner of Main and 5th Street downtown. I noticed that you're selling, blanks for $5.50 a barrel, and just thought you might like to know that across town, your competition is selling it for $3.50 a barrel. Did you know that? Well, then you go on. If you can do that, do you think the guy's going to remain interested? Yeah, he's going to be riveted. You're in his pocket. The closer you can get to having a personal conversation with the guy, the better off you're going to get.
I had a conversation with a guy just last week. He was in my summer coaching program, and he's still struggling to get over the hump. He's in a consulting business, and when you're doing consulting, you have a particularly tricky fine line to walk, because if you start calling these people up and saying, "Oh, well, you never responded to my letter. How can I help you?" You position yourself as very poorly, right?
Yeah, you're weak. You're selling from your heel.
Right. And so what I told him to do is, it's something I did a couple of years ago with another client. Was he sent out this email to his customers where he says on Tuesday morning from 10 to 12, I'm going to have open line with anybody who filled out this form and schedules an appointment with my receptionist can talk to me for 15 minutes. And instead of paying me $300 an hour, it's free just on this one day. And it was a way of him talking to his customers, which was the real goal. More than anything, to figure out what he's not telling them that he should be. It's like he's not hitting their sweet spot.
Right, and yet he positioned himself with a sales and takeaway tactic that made this call, rather than at the free call, if you got some time, you might want to check it out. Instead, he made it seem like something that you'd be a fool not to see on.
That's right. And so he just like, well, they got 15 minutes. So at the end of the 15 minutes, he's got to hang up. So he's still maintaining the value of his time, but he gets to talk to them and ask them, okay, what kind of problems are you having? And I think the fundamental issue is he's not describing their problems the way they describe their problems. And so he's talking about X and they want Z, and they ain't meeting. And then that's really what the issue is. And it definitely works for the other client. I don't know if the guy I'm referring to has done it yet, but the other guy, he's this 15 minutes, he actually made this part of his autoresponder, and everybody goes in his list, gets a chance to do the open line thing. And it's become the number one closing technique for getting new business. It's just talking to these people. And he's still valuing himself and not degrading his position.
There's a trick in, I can't guarantee that it works, but, excuse me, I'm sucking on Altoid. There's a trick that is used in some real estate market that I've heard about, and the real estate guys, they use it, swear it works. Rather than having an open house all day long, or from 8 to 2, or 10 to 4, or 2 to 5 or something for a house, they will have an open house for like an hour, for 55 minutes, no longer. And they let people know, and because 3/4 of the time when they have a long open house, they're just sitting like twiddling their thumbs. When they reduce the time, when they make it, make that little window of opportunity very, very small, they quadruple the number of people that come through, and they raise the quality of the people coming through. They don't get as many looky with.
Oh, really?
It's the principle that you're talking about the guy doing too. You position yourself. And this is what the UST is all about, positioning yourself uniquely in the market to be able to sell. Unique sales position. So rather than just being, something else you can try if you got time and maybe come over. No, this is like an opportunity that's rare, that ain't going to happen very often. And in fact, you've got a very, very short window to operate. You raise the urgency factor. You get you get a little adrenaline dump as a person. That's fine. Now, is this going to work with everybody? No. If they're not interested in what you got to sell, they're not going to care about any of that, and they're not going to get. But you don't want to talk to those people anyway. So it's like a lot of people get confused. A long time ago, somebody wrote me when I used to get a lot of, it's not hate mail, but white mail, as we call it, which is just people just felt that they had to sit down and write me a letter to tell me why I was so wrong and what I was doing. It's hilarious read. I don't read it anymore because they tend to take up my afternoon as I craft back letters back on immediately.
I understand.
The guy early on wrote me says you are hurting people because you're telling, you're writing in a way that isn't including everybody in the market. And the guy says, I'm a marketer, and I know that you have to include absolutely everybody in the market when you write. That's why you have to write a little blandly and and make sure you include everybody. When I thought about it, I actually wrote a newsletter about it. I said, this guy couldn't be more wrong. You want to write in a way that knocks all the looky-loos out, and you don't care if you piss off the people who aren't going to buy. The people who are just looking for something to do for a few minutes, so they're reading your stuff and they're thinking, oh my God, his English is horrible. I can't read this. And they get mad about it. They do stuff. You don't care about that. You want the guy who reads this and goes, oh my God, I really, really want this. I need this. Thank God that guy gave it to my life. And if that's the only people you reach, then what do you care? Then don't go for these huge numbers. Don't try to get a 50% opt-in rate, because you've heard that you should get high opt-in rates. If 3/4 of those opt-in are people that just wandered in because you were vague enough that, they're not even quite sure what's going on, and they're not going to do anything but take up your time. If you get a 1% opt-in rate, but that 1% represents a 90% flip rate on the other end of selling, you should be very, very happy. I mean, it's all a numbers game at the end of the day. You want to count the dollars, not the percentage. Anyway, so. But don't worry about ascending people that are easily ascended and aren't going to be buyers. Stop worrying about it.
I think what you're saying, really, another way to put it is effective advertising is often makes no sense to the people who are not buyers.
Exactly.
It's almost a sign that you're in the zone. It's like if you went to a jazz club in Chicago and you listened to bebop jazz or something, most people listening to that, they, like my wife, I took my wife to a club like that about a month ago. It was to hear my drum teacher, actually. If she listened to that, she goes, this sounds like a parody of music.
Right, a wall of noise.
But it's a language that people who get it, they understand, and people who don't, it don't matter. It's kind of like those martial arts ads you write in all those crazy black belt magazines. To an average white collar Joe, they're like insane.
It's even more targeted than that. I get a lot of people. I have a reputation in the industry, even among people who know me, of writing. I admit that I write outrageous headline and hooks. However, I do not do blatant hard selling, nor am I doing any screaming and things like that. I generally don't use exclamation marks, for example. Yes, people, when they think they're writing like me, generally do just make outrageous promises, and they put exclamation marks, and they're essentially shouting on the page. They do this is because they misunderstand what's happening. They're reading one of those ads, those golf ads or the self-defense ads or those ads to markets that they have no interest in. So they don't see that what I'm saying is not outrageous to somebody inside of the market. That I'm aiming my copy right at the tender heart of a golfer, for example, or a guy who's interested in the self-defense market. To him, it's not shouting or hard selling. It's, oh my God, I'm so glad you told me about this information. This is what I want to hear. But to somebody who's not interested in the market, to them it seems kind of outrageous and it offends their sense of reality or challenges their belief system. So they think it's hard sell. I think it's something it's not. And I'm glad you brought that up, because it's a clarification I've been trying to make as I go along. I do not do hard sell. I don't shout. I am not. What's the word I'm looking for? I can't think of it. But it's I'm not blatantly out there screaming on the page. Because when you're in the market, it is framing. It's letting you know that there's some really, really good information. It's kind of like you going, to me and saying, "Oh my gosh, Miles Davis is playing down the street. Did you realize this?" I would drop everything to go see him. I'd drop everything, absolutely everything, and run out of the door. And I'm glad you came up and shook me and knocked the phone out of my hand, while I was on this important call. That was more important to me. To somebody who didn't understand it, they'd say, why was Perry shouting? And what the heck were you guys all upset about? Right, advertising? My God, I must have to learn to shout and do all this stuff. No, the shouting was irrelevant. What was relevant was getting the information across in the fastest and most expedient way.
In other words, I wasn't cajoling you. I was expressing my excitement because I'm into Miles Davis, you're into Miles Davis, we're having a little Miles Davis fest. But to you, to the outsider, they can't tell what's going on, but I'm speaking your language, and so they think I'm yelling at you, but really, we're bonding.
Really? It's sharing the passion, Perry. Everybody has passion about it. I like to use the example of account. Accountants generally have this reputation of being the most boring people on the planet. And from the ones I know, it's generally true. However, to an accountant, what he's doing is pretty exciting, unless he's burned out. He just likes to job there, but it doesn't got him into that anyway. He likes working alone. He likes working with summers. He likes to dance. He likes helping people. Whatever has got him to go through the years of schooling he needed to go through. He did his certification, hanging his shingle, to do all that. This is what he does. This is what he gets up and he puts on a tie and he goes out and he sits down and he does this all day long. Well, guess what? Most people live lives that are nothing interesting happens to them. They don't know any interesting people. They don't get to go anywhere interesting or do anything interesting. And for an accountant, he doesn't get to come home and talk about his job to his wife because she's sick of hearing about it. His kids don't care what he does for a living. None of his friends at the bowling alley or that they play cards with on the weekend care about accounting. They all think it's boring. Well, to him, it's not boring. So if you arrive at his inbox or his mailbox or his magazine, and you say, you know what, I'm an accountant too, and I understand. To me, this is the most exciting thing in the world when you're doing it right, because it can bring in a lot of money. It's independence. I love what's you just start rattling off, and you get inside that passionate sweet spot inside of the accountant. It's the same as you and me talking about Miles Davis. You're sharing.
Yep.
Everybody has passion, and especially in the information market. Because in information markets, would you say most of these people are in information? That's on the call. Half are in information. All information is furthering your understanding of whatever you're kind of passionate about. And it can be low-level passion, but usually it's high-level passion, especially if you're going to do the irrational act of taking out your credit card and sending money that was once yours over to someone else's account. That's an irrational act that involves high levels of passion. So the more you can tap into that, the more you understand that, the more you're going to essentially, grab the person by the lapels and kind of rattle their cage. I know, if I don't get your attention right now, you're going to miss it because he's playing for an hour. He's only going to play for an hour and a half, and he's right down the street. So that's my Miles Davis bebop. Although he is the bebop in here.
Well, you're totally right, and I still do to a small extent market to industrial engineers, which is like, that's just as bad as accountants, right? And I always used to struggle with this. I would see all this copy. I'd get Dan Kennedy's newsletter or whatever, and I would look at that, and I would think to myself, if I wrote these guys a letter like this, I would feel like I was trying to sell hot dogs at Starbucks.
Right.
And, I really kind of struggled with that. But at one point, I got a little burst of inspiration, and we created this training class. And the people that were going to come to this class were engineers. And I wrote this sales letter for this thing called DeviceNet Bootcamp. And because I was an engineer and because I lived in that world, I knew what these guys were into. And I wrote this 4-page sales letter, and it was all about the curiosity of knowing how to solve certain kind of problems and what it's like when you get this job and you got to install this equipment and it all gets screwed up, and something that was supposed to be done on Monday takes till Wednesday, and it costs somebody $20,000 and everybody's yelling at you. And I read that thing, and you know what? That hit the sweet spot. And it was right up. It was, I mean, anybody that read this would recognize it as a direct marketing, copywriting project. Okay. But to the people that were getting it, they didn't look at this and go, wait a minute, I've never gotten a letter like this before. Even though they didn't. I mean, you never saw anything like this in that market ever. But they would read it and they'd go, I want to go to this class. This sounds awesome. And all I had to do was make sure that the letter, also, when they give it to their boss, that the letter convinced their boss the thing would pay for itself. And so they wanted to go because they're curious. Their boss would let them go because hey, if this saves you 1 hour on a startup, it'll pay for itself. And the boss goes, yeah, that's true. So he'd sign off on it. And it was a success. We sold about $250,000 of that training. What were you going to say, John?
Did you tell him what to say to the boss?
Not explicitly, but we have the sidebar and it said, if this saves you 1 hour on a startup, if this saves 1 hour of downtime, if it makes one job start on Monday instead of starting on Tuesday, this will pay for itself many times over. And anybody that read that and lived in that world knew that was true.
You might have even upped response a little bit and being said, here's what's the date of the box.
Okay. I hadn't thought of that, but I think you're right.
You definitely want to slow stuff out, but that's a great tactic to use. And again, that goes back to what I was talking about at the very beginning of this call. Give him a reason. Making him want this isn't always going to solve it. He may want it, but he may not be the guy that just writes a check, or he may not be the guy that can say yes or no. He may have a wife, he may have a boss, he may have a partner, all kinds of things that are going to say no, and he has to go to them and give them a reason. So you got to give him a damn good reason to do this. And this whole idea about making the money back, that's a rational reason. That makes sense. That's something you can tell somebody why you want it. But why did he really want to get this training and do this stuff that you were talking about? Because you fed into his passion. He wanted to go deeper in this. He wanted the respect, the confidence, and the extra business. And
yes,
of his place in the hierarchy in the business. He was going to be the guy that was taking care of business. He was going to get to be the go-to guy in this whole thing. There were all these kind of irrational things that he may not have been aware of, but all he had to do was go to the boss and this is going to pay for itself with one extra buy-in.
Right on.
Okay, let's take some of these questions.
Well, yeah, let's do this. Do you want to take a potty break yet, Don?
No.
Okay. Well, let me dive into this and I'll pull out a few questions. We've got some really great headlines. I liked the one here. He says, let me find it just a sec. Oh, yeah. This is Eric Ruth. He goes, John, you're probably the most swiped copywriter ever. Do you swipe or do you circle the desk till the original hook headline comes to you? Gene Schwartz talks about the importance of total originality in every piece. Do you agree? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I don't agree in originality. I mean, especially now, one of these things that's going on now, especially online, is just the blatant swiping that's going on. I can't hop online or cruise through, marketing sites of Google without coming across one of my ads that's a knock off. But because I actually include swipe files in my Insiders Club and stuff. I mean, I have, that Pandora's box was open a long time ago. So what happens is that until you get good enough to start to become more original, you're going to need help. You're going to need, one of the things that Howard did, for example, is he had a big stack of 500 3x5 cards with great classic headlines on it. And he would just go through the stack and throw out a few that maybe, triggered ideas in his head. Of course, the headlines he took off maybe for a diet product when he was actually writing about a marketing course or something completely different. But it's the structure of the headline. And once you're looking for blueprints. You're looking for things that kind of kind of will help you. It's kind of like an architect. He's going to build in Arizona, but that doesn't mean he can't go through plans of houses that were built in Minnesota or downtown New York or something. Because you'll say, oh, the New York, the basic foundation will work, but because we're built on rock instead of cement. But look at the second story. Look at how the eaves are done or whatever. So he'll find pieces of that. So you start to do that. So yeah, using swipe file makes sense, but you're still going to come up with an original font in that almost no two USPs are the same. Since a USP, what's the first letter in USP?
Unique.
It's unique. So there's going to be something different about what you're doing, about what you're going toward. And a lot of rookie writers are just happy, they kind of let out a sigh of relief when they've written a generic ad that doesn't really stand out because it's kind of like everybody else's ads that's faking it. So at least they might break even or pull a profit. So that's like your first step. But if you're really going to move into the world, into world-class writing, where you're not just getting heartbreak results, where that for every dollar you make, you leave the $10 on the table. You're going to start picking up $8, $9 or $10 of that of all the money that's available out there in that market. To get to that point, you are going to have to be original, but not to the point that your writing is original. Where reading it should be a passive, unconscious process. You don't want the person to say, "Oh my God, what a well-crafted sentence that was." It sends shivers down my spine. No, you want the reading to be. You want your sales letter, your sales pitch to be a breathless ride. We call it down the grease chute or the grease slides. He wants the reader to start us at the top, give him a shove, and he's going so fast towards the end that he can't even catch a breath. Everything is happening so fast. It's just everything you read just fuels a fire inside of him. This is the most exciting thing he's read today. The images are popping in and flying on what has to happen. He has to have this. And a lot of times when you write a good pitch, they don't read the whole pitch. They're done by page 2 or 3, and they're going to the back to see how to order.
That's very true.
That scene from is it Barry McGuire or whatever with Tom Cruise and what's her name, Renee Zellweger, where he gives us a long speech about why he wants her in his life, and she says, "You had me at hello." You want that to happen, so that some of my best pitches, nobody's ever read the last few pages because they are so hot and bothered by the middle part. They get through half of the bullet and then they're ordering, they're calling, they're looking for the order card, or they're jumping or they're scrolling all the way down to the bottom and find out how they can get this.
Hey, that's great.
Yeah, they're not reading your pitch to have an experience of reading the pitch. They're reading it because you hooked them. You hooked them because they want something, they need a solution, or there's some reason why they're there. And you're just piling on fuel to this little tiny spark that happened and turn it into a raging fire deep inside their gut. So
that's very true. And if I think about a lot of things I've bought, rarely did I read the whole thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes I did, but most of the time I was like, okay, I'm convinced. Why?
You remember Ben's Vegas seminar?
Yes.
I never read the pitch. I was literally the first guy to sign up. I heard from someone that he was going to be giving a seminar. We didn't even know what the date was or where it was, and I emailed him, and I said, "Sherry, I want to sign up. Where do I send the money?" He says, "I don't have anyone for you to send the money yet, John." He said, "I'll put you on a list or something." I said, "No, I'm sending the money. How much are you going to charge?" And without knowing anything else about it, I sent him a check overnight by FedEx, and his wife says, "Actually, you were the first one." His pitch came, it was irrelevant to me, except for finding out where it was going to be and what the hotel was, and if I was going to get a special thing with it.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because I don't think I ever even saw the pitch myself. I was probably from the first to get in, but I just sent him a check too. He said, "Oh, I'm going to be doing the seminar," and I said, "Well, sign me up." So exactly. Well, here's I got a question from Scott Braden. He says, "While the copy gurus say there's certain elements a good sales letter or offer must or should have, headlines, testimonials, a TS, etc., but there are also more advanced things like setting up subheads and callouts for easy scanning. Do you have a personal checklist that you use to make sure you don't forget anything, and what's on it?"
I thought we had a checklist when I started out. I don't know what it is. And in my course, of course, Kick-Ass Copywriting Secrets of a Marketing Rebel, I have checklists like that, or I explain it all in the chapters, and I have a prototype letter, I think at chapter 7 or something, which just kind of goes through the basic stuff. So yeah, there's some things there, but basically, you want to get to the point where you're making a verbal sales pitch. You're having a conversation now. You can't hear what he's saying back to you, but you're assuming that he's saying, "Oh yeah," or what do you mean by that? Or what's that all about? And so that's why I start certain paragraphs with, well, here's the story. Here's what that means. Here's why this is important to you. And I do a lot of that, kind of having that conversation. Not anticipating, well, actually I am anticipating what the objections are, but he may or may not have had that objection come up in his mind, but it's going to be there because I understand the market. I understand that most people have these objections. So I'm going to address everything there. And I'm going to say, here's why, here's why that is so important. Here's why this should matter to you. Here's why this will make your life easier. Start talking about it. And then here's what you're going to find. Then I go into these blind teaser bullets, and it's just, oh my God, he hadn't even thought about that. And this is, starting to build the image in his head and fuel that fire. But when it comes down to subheads and things like that, there is a visual element to it. So that's something where a lot of people don't, kind of fall down where the professionalism starts to evaporate if you kind of learn this, by learning it the wrong way or learning it, homegrown stuff. Professional writers, when I was for the Dick Baylors, Rodale, Agoraphones, crafting the final look of the letter. That's why these letters are such a pain in the butt. I'm not just editing it to the point of good enough. I'm editing it to the point where it's going to impress them with the way it looks. And that means a lot of eye relief. And that means that, the letter kind of has, each page kind of has like an hourglass shape. That's what you kind of want. You never want big blocks of gray copy, even in email. You want to break it all up. It's a good way to write right now, if you're a rookie, single sentence paragraphs. And it can seem kind of jerky for a while, but what you're doing is you're spacing that thing out. You're airing it out. So you never cover, so the reader doesn't come across a 15-line paragraph where he has to go, well, if I'm going to, you just talked about bathroom breaks. If I'm going to take a break, I better do it now before I read this. And he said, put to the side, that's it. You lost him. So you want to make each one, you want to use the bucket brigade, which is, so one sentence says, and here's why this is important to you, blah, 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 blah. Next paragraph is another sentence that may grammatically belong in that previous paragraph, but you're not doing it. You're spacing it down, and it says, what's more, blah, blah, blah. Then the next sentence is another paragraph. And not only that, blah, 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 you're using this stuff that makes them continue reading. So, the more eye relief, the better. Especially when you're a rookie, you will see that often my ads, because I use such long headlines sometimes, you got to be really good to use a long headline because there can't be a fair word in there. So those long headlines are long because there's no way to write it shorter. I'm not writing long copy because long copy magically works. I'm writing long copy because that's what it takes to get the sales pitch across. So I was translating the sales pitch in my head from the imaginary conversation I'm having with the reader, and it just takes 8 to 12 to 20 pages or whatever to have that conversation. It's essentially like sending a salesman out to go knock on your door, and I'm not telling them you got 150 words and you got to shut up no matter what. No, you take just a pitch. I don't care if it takes you 15 minutes or an hour and a half or whatever it takes. Find out what's going to happen. Now, getting back to the idea of a list or something. Most door-to-door salesmen do have a list. They understand they have 15 things they got to go through with this guy. And if they cut that pitch short, they're going to risk losing the sale. If you're selling encyclopedias, stuff, they will give you a pitch to go down. And that's been a tested pitch that's been gone through for years with a fine-tooth comb. And trying to shortcut that pitch is going to cause you problems. This is answering another question you haven't asked me, but it's all about the idea of prepping and fitting what you need to do into some kind of list. And when you understand what it takes to sell to somebody, you're going to have to cover a certain number of objections. And if you're going into a market for the first time, just write down all the objections you're going to encounter. This may involve interviewing some people, finding out what the objections are by asking them, like you talked about the guy having the 15-minute calls, or just what you're doing here, asking for questions. Find out what's on people's minds. If you're not a person in this market, if you're either a freelancer or you're getting into a market where you're really not a fan of the market, you just decided it's something you wanted to get into, you better find out what's on the person's mind, what's on the typical buyer's mind. And what flipped him, what took him from being a semi-interested prospect to becoming a take out my wallet and give you money kind of customer? What objections were there? Is it too high price? Can I reuse this? Are you going to call me again? Are you going to send my name out? There's all kinds of things that people are worried about that are keeping them from making a final decision. And some of those objections are irrational. Some are very rational, make sense. Some are myths. You may be clearing up some bad ideas about the product, but each one is individual. So there is no master list of what's covered because I talked about having a headline. I like to use superscripts, which are like the headline has like top 3 benefits, so to speak. The superscript above that will have the 4th benefit. The subheads beneath that will kind of tidy up some of the housekeeping, bringing in the word, you can see a tree, or you can sample this without, you can sample this right now if you wanted to put 11 people, blah, blah. Then my opening paragraph kind of re-sums up the top 3 stuff, get into it, then I get into the pitch. And I'm always thinking about what the reader is saying to himself to get out of reading this thing. Because he's looking for an out all the time. So I'm always thinking, what can I say now that's going to rehook him, that's going to keep him interested, And so I keep coming back to him about how this is going to help him, how this is going to do this. And then I generally get to a point where I just say bullet. And if I only have 15 bullets, I'm going to use them all. Or if I have 6 bullets, if I have 152 bullets, which is a wealth of information, I have been known to use, I have been known to write 8 pages of bullets, but I may not want to do that. I may want to core that down and just say there's so much more, and have that use half the bullets as a backup letter, to people that don't buy but are sitting on the fence. So, I get to the point where there's bullet, and what the bullets do is they tweak every single little hot button in his passionate little heart. And you want to make a list. You want to make a list of all the benefits, all the features, all the benefits that he hasn't thought about, all the answers to all the objections, all of that stuff. Make those out as bullets. Make a hierarchy of them, starting with the most important first. Don't hide the most important benefits and elements of your sales pitch, because you never know when he's going to stop reading. And I'll tell you something, I have written 4 or 5 pages with a bullet before, and I know from experience that sometimes it's one bullet that makes the sale. So if that one bullet is going to be a common denominator in that market where it's going to flip 40 or 50% of these guys, I want that bullet to be number 1.
Well, I noticed that basically your response to this question was, it's not about having a checklist of things that your letter's going to look like. It's a checklist of ways that you're going to harmonize with your customer.
Well, but I would emphasize again, it's the sales pitch. It's the sales conversation you would have. And I like the word harmonize, but that's true. Getting in tune with the person you're talking to. It's not about you. So many writers make the mistake of thinking what I think about the product and what I like about it, or what happened to me when I did the product. That's maybe a passing interest. Most of the time, it's just no interest at all. This is all about the reader. It's all about his wants, his needs, and what it's going to do for him. Take yourself out of it. You are merely the vehicle for taking the benefits that exist that he doesn't know about, or isn't cognizant of, or isn't quite understand. And you are the vehicle that you are making this manifest inside of his head. So that they sit there. I don't know if I said this before, but one of the biggest thrills I get is when I hear about somebody who read a pitch of mine, put it down, and for some reason didn't order, and then woke up in the middle of the night cursing me because they had to get up and find that 800 number and call because they couldn't stop thinking about it. And that's, so what you want really is the sale. You want the guy to orders before he finished reading, to drop everything and go do that. Sometimes that can't happen. Maybe he's on the train home and he's not near a phone or whatever. or he's online, but he hasn't got a credit card or whatever. But you want your pitch to get inside and rattle around and make him uncomfortable. Putting that buying decision in there is an act of discomfort for the prospect. You don't want him to be comfortable. You want him to be uncomfortable. And the only way to scratch that itch is to order. Find out what the fun's all about.
What? Now, that's a great way. Okay, I want to talk about this for a second. This thing of making people uncomfortable. And there's another question that somehow this just popped in my head. Sunny asked this question about what if I don't like to promote myself? And somehow I get this feeling like these two things are very related to each other.
They are.
Speak to that. Speak to this whole, discomfort about promoting yourself or discomfort about making the other guy squirm.
It's a very common thing I come across with critique. People write from their heels. And what that means is that they're not, they are squirrely about just coming out and saying, you need this, you need to buy it, here's how to get it, here's how much it is. They can't say that. Well, you know what? That's what you need to do. If this becomes a psychotic episode in your life where you absolutely cannot ask somebody to buy, you need to get into a different business. This is what I talk about when I talk about waking up to your inner salesman. Everybody has an inner salesman. 99% of the inner salesman in the population is just fast asleep. And most of the time, he will never be woken up. If you're in this business, you need to wake the little bastard up and put him to work selling for you. This inner salesman, there's a lot of TV shows out there like Lost, where people are suddenly thrust out of their lives into another situation. You know what's the first thing that happens when you're hungry and you're on a deserted island and you're kind of desperate and you got to go into survival mode? What's the first thing that happens inside your head? Your inner salesman wakes up. And if there's only a little bit of food there, you're gonna find yourself negotiating for survival. And that's where, I'm not saying you need to go into that, but really, when I first started writing, I made a decision that turned out to be just the basis of everything I needed to do. And I call it gun to the head writing. I sat down and I imagined a gun to my head that would go off if I did make this letter work. Now, that gun wasn't real. There wasn't a real loaded gun, but there wasn't, metaphorically there was, because I only had enough. I started out with enough money for one more month's rent. And I could barely afford another tank of gas in the car. And I had to make those first pieces work. So when I sat down, using my meager skills and I was using a swipe file at the time, by the way. It was very, a tested advertising method. I was swiping headlines from there like crazy. It's John Carlton book, written in the 40s, I believe. Anyway, when I sat down, I thought, if I don't make this work, then I got to go find another gig, because there's no safety net. There's no second chance here. That attitude I have kept my entire career, and that's the attitude you need. A gun to the head that if you don't make this work, the gun's going to go off. So what would you use that word? Would you position your pitch this way? Would you be a wussy and not ask for the sale if a gun was to your head? And the answer almost always is no. You wouldn't, you wouldn't use this bad word. You'd try a stronger word. You wouldn't come across and, on some tangent and make some weird noises about maybe buying this if you want or maybe not. I don't really care or anything like that. No, you would come forward and say, you need this. You need this right now. Here's how you get it. Here's why this price is good. Here's everything you need to know to make the buying decision.
That's great. That's great. I think so many of us, and I've been slowly unlearning. Okay, I am not going to be squeamish about asking people for money. When I first started selling my marketing system to basically salespeople who, they need to generate sales leads and they need to get in to see a customer without beating the door down and cold calling and all this kind of stuff. And I knew how to do that. And I had to look in the mirror and get straight with myself that look, Barry, if they don't if you don't get their money and if they don't get their product, they're going to stay on the same road they're on. And that road is misery for them. Like I had to get straight in my head that what I'm doing is good and it's worth their money. And if they do what I tell them to do, it's worth 10 or 100 times more than what they're paying me. And I shouldn't feel at all squeamish about that. And I got over it. But I had that feeling for a long time.
It's all about being the go-to guy. You know, if you really have good product, if what you offer really will help the person, the prospect you're going to, and it's so unusual that if they don't get this product, they probably will not solve the problem they have, or they will wind up with something inferior, then it's your job to stand up and say, I know what's going on. I'm the guy you should be dealing with. Come to me, get this, do it right now. I mean, you know, it's shame on you because you're such a weaselly writer that you don't get the point across that there's no alternative to this, that this is the best option out there, that you're going to take care of this, that there's no risk at all, that all they got to do is try it. If you don't get this point across using the best salesmanship tactics you can use, then shame on you. That's your job. That's your only job, to get that point across.
Oh, that's great.
That's why you gotta wake up the inner salesman and you put that bad boy to work.
I had a couple of really interesting questions about refunds. I'm just gonna I'll go through both of them and you can respond. So John is 150% behind money back guarantees. So is Perry and 1,000 other guys. How does this work with fiction ebooks and text adventure games? I'm definitely afraid I'll sell 9,000 copies and issue 8,990 refunds. And then those 8,990 people still have one of my titles for free. In the industry that I'm involved in, books and software, the combination of the two, refunds and purchase titles don't happen, not even with a note from God. It's like to be a maverick, shop the industry, do the exact opposite, have a bunch of controversy, shed some light. I think this is a pivot point to me closing truckloads of more sales. I need serious convincing. Let's start with that one. What do you think about that?
So this guy is in a market where he thinks if he makes a generous guarantee that too many people are going to take him up on it.
Yeah, he thinks like 99% of them will.
Well, my first question is, why does he think that? Now, here's the thing with guarantees. A lot of rookie, first of all, no one experienced in direct response sale questions the value of a guarantee. So rookies come in and they get all nervous on offering a guarantee. When I say rookies, I'm sometimes talking about guys who've been in business for 50 years. They just never done direct response. Okay, maybe the retail or the joint thing. And what a guarantee does, nobody, in my experience, if you have to live with about a 7% guarantee rate, 7% return rate. About 7% of any market, and this is not an exact thing, but this pretty much rounds out. If somebody calls and says, I got a 7% return rate, how do I get a lower? My answer is, you're not. You're just not. You know, there's just enough people out there that feel squirrely after ordering that they're not going to do it. If you have a 14 to 20%, in some markets, that's average. When you're talking about some of the diet markets that it's just you have to learn to live with a high return rate. However, if you got a 20% return rate and you know the competition is offering a 7% or even lower, there are ways around it. One of the ways to do it is a stick letter, which I'm sure you've talked about, Perry. I know you've used it before. And that's just reinforcing the buying decision in the prospect's mind. Sometimes the stick letter relies upon the product. It tells them, hey, you know, I'm really glad you ordered. You just made the best decision of your life. And, you know, because you were such a good guy, did this here, I'm sending you something free I didn't even talk about. Saying you don't make another sale, you give us the free information. When the product arrives, and this is something that a lot of people don't understand, when you write a great direct response sales pitch and the person buys and they get the same, often, and I don't understand how this works. I don't question it though. Often they won't crack the seal on the package. They'll put it up on their shelf and they won't get to it. Why is this? Because when you do the sales pitch, you get into their passionate sweet spot and you generate the excitement needed for them to make the buy. Time passes. Even if they're downloading an ebook, some time passes and they get the ebook and they put it in a file. If they want to get to that later, they get to that. Well, the passion starts to fade. That's why in direct response, you got to make that sale while he's got the letter in his hand or the email up on his screen. If you let him get away, even if he swears you he's going to come back later, it's just sales and known stats. It's very few of people going to come back to take a buy because, again, buying is an irrational decision. So, as far as the guarantees go, if you have a high guarantee rate, only a couple of things are happening. One, you just got a shitty product. And shame on you for doing that, and you deserve your high return rate. If you have a good product, though, and you're still getting a high return, then it might be a pricing problem. And you have to make sure that the product has value equal to the price you're charging. Now, this doesn't mean we're just selling information. How do you put a price on information, for example? Or what was the guy selling games? I mean, how do you do that? So most people are used to paying $19.95 for a game for their Xbox. Or actually, $39.95. Then if you're charging less than or charging more than the industry average, you have to have a reason why. This is why we use reason why copy. We give them a reason why it's cheaper, why it's more expensive, or why it is the price it is. And all you got to do is give them a reason why, because everybody understands in the sales letters, you give them reasons why they want the product. But then when it comes down to the close, you got to give them a reason why they're paying what they're paying. And when you do that right, then in their head, they never question, or they can answer the wife or the partner or their anybody who questions them because why did you pay $100 for this? You can get an Xbox game for $39, and the guy says, well, because it blank. What have you armed him with to say that makes this all worthwhile? So the person who's doing the questioning says, oh, that makes sense. Okay, very good. Now, as far as being scared about guarantees, if he thinks he's getting a 99% guarantee, then he's in a market I've never heard of where people are trying, excuse me, that's another phone line. People are actually going to the trouble of reading a sales letter. Think about this process, guys. Reading a sales letter, taking out their wallet, ordering something, waiting for it to come or download it or whatever the process is, knowing that they're going to keep part of it and send the rest of it back and do all this and get their money back and do that. Yeah, there's probably a few people out there that maybe think that way. That's why you may never get below a 7% return rate. But you're never going to have a huge market full of people who are going to go to that trouble just to screw you out of one little freebie thing that they get to keep, and do that. The Rodale, the biggest sailor in the country, I think, still, and they do book things. They have one offer. They never change, and they don't let the writers change it. You can't pay for the book. You can only order it free. So if you read one of the pitches and you decide you want this book on Starzies or financial advice or whatever it is, you can only order it free for 30 days. At the end of 30 days, you can send it back and pay nothing. If you want it, just keep it. You will be billed, and you can pay the bill. Even if you decide 5 years later, however, that you made a mistake and after all you don't want the product for whatever reason, you can send it back then and get a refund. So you can look at it free. If you decide you don't want it, all you got to do is send it back, and they even provide the proceeds for sending it back. And even if you do pay for it, later you can change your mind. This is the biggest mailer in the country. They go to every single list available. They mail every name they can get their hands on, so they cover almost every market and every person. Sorry, the dog is barking at the One of the advantages of working at home is you get to work at home. One of the disadvantages of working at home is that you have to work at home.
Yeah, I understand. I had a 5-year-old giving me pictures while I was talking here. So,
Well, anyway, that kind of answers the question. First of all, it's an irrational fear. Second of all, and this is something I want to say. This guy is asking a question because and he started out saying, I know that you and John and everybody else talks about guarantees and stuff, but I'm in a market that, and as soon as I hear that, my eye just glazed over. There ain't nothing different about your market. It's like they're saying, hey, I know that every guy who's ever, asked for the hand of a woman in marriage, did these things or did something like this, but my girlfriend's different. No, she's not. Stop, stop. I gotta close. So that happens. Well, unless you think I missed some part of that.
No, I think that's good. Well, I think you just try for a week at least. And I also thought it was interesting that that with Rodale, they're not even getting the guy's credit card first; they're billing him.
That's right.
Wow. I mean, it's not like they have to pay the bill. Are they going to get reported credit agency or something if they don't pay for their book?
I remember asking them about that, what kind of thing they do. And basically, you go through, I guess they have collection things, where they mail them, but basically like I say, it's a bottom line game. They know they're going to get a certain number of people who are going to keep the books and never send it back.
Yep.
And the answer to that is, so what? They know that as they get a book that works, they know what their numbers have to be to be able to cover all exchange fees. It's like when you mail out letters. A certain number of letters are not going to get delivered. They're just not going to make it into the person's mailbox. There's going to be losses involved. I hate to use this analogy, but it's like the invasion of Normandy in World War II. Eisenhower knew that landing in Normandy was going to include, a 50% casualty rate.
Yeah, something like that.
How do you make a decision like that? And the reason he did is that he literally had a gun to his head. There was, that was a decision he had to make to save Europe, to get in there. And it was not something that he would make in a normal situation. It was an abnormal situation, or it was the situation he had, I guess. He didn't have another option. He didn't have the option of waiting or doing something different or trying something different. That's what they agreed on. That's what they knew they had to do. The time was right. They had to go in. They just knew that it was they were going to have to live with that.
Yeah, it was 50% now or more later. So, right?
That's the same decision that went into the farm of Hiroshima. And I guess we're going up on a tangent. Better left, not explored.
Well, your point is taken. Okay, here's another one. He says, what's the magic formula to web marketing? Okay, killer copy on the site, then they opt in. According to AWeber's page, it takes at least 7 messages before people buy. How many opt-in emails do you send? 1 killer piece, 9 small but powerful bullets. How do you stagger it from multi-piece email campaign?
That's great. You probably answer this better than I can. I mean, the answer is basically, what does it take for your market? And the idea, you need to say, whatever AWeber is saying is including every Yahoo out there sending out emails. So if you need 7 emails to make a sale, then you're either dealing with extremely dense or uninterested markets, or you're not selling very well. So generally, this is where Dan Kennedy and I kind of part ways in that I'm not saying he's wrong. Dan does this to a degree of success that is staggering, but he likes to do the the multi-layered advertising thing where you get hit with 7 or 14 letters, and they keep their slight variation to do that. I don't like to do that. And I come from the other school, and it's really because I'm so damn lazy. 7 letters or 14 letters. I want to write 1 killer letter that can be nailed over and over and over again. Now, here's the secret that a lot of people don't understand. When you have a sales letter that goes out that gets a 20% response or, brings in X number of dollars, remail it again in 3 weeks, and you're going to get X divided by 2. You're going to get half of that. And if you've got a big hit on your hand, then you're an idiot for not mailing it. And the formula is keep mailing it until it gets down to about break even. Because half a break even is a losing thing. Now, is it exact? No, it's not exact, but it's the way smart direct response marketers work. So you don't need different letters. Now, you can change the letter a little bit by saying on the envelope, last chance, or, second notice, and in red on the top of the letter, or have a little cover note. I sent you this before. I didn't know if you got it. I thought you might want to know about this because it's such a great deal, blah, 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 things like that. But you don't need to change the pitch.
Well, I'll weigh in on this from really a different angle, and I'll refer to Ben Savinga's seminar, where what Ben Savinga's formula is all about is including with the advertising lots and lots of good content that makes it valuable in and of itself, right? The Magalog approach and that sort of thing, right?
Yeah, and they are not writing multiple magalogs. I can guarantee you that.
Well, right, but what the email version of this is, and this is how I do it, is I have one sales letter on my website for one particular product, and somebody opts in, they start getting a whole bunch of autoresponder messages, and all those different autoresponder messages are basically little pieces of Gary's Magalog, if you will. Right? Where, well, let me tell you how to do this. Let me tell you how to do this. Let me tell you how to do this. And they might get 10 of those or 20 or whatever. Then I'll just take content and I'll keep spoon feeding little bits of it. But at the end of every single email, the link back to that original sales letter. So I don't just hit them once. I build a relationship with them over time. And what I found is that sometimes I never actually got them to buy the thing that I was originally trying to sell them, but they did buy something else. There's probably people in this coaching program, they never actually bought my book that I was trying to sell in the first place, but they bought the coaching. But the reason they trusted me was because, like Gary's formula, I proved that I was trustworthy and reliable by giving them some good content. You are doing that in a different way with your blog.
Right. Actually, what I do with my blog is reverse the sales process. Rather than me going out, I have something where people come in, and it works very, very well. But it's all dependent on personality and content. That's a whole other section of tough stuff.
Right. And that's what I think autoresponders mostly should be. They shouldn't be hammering sales pitches. You can have the hammering sales pitch on your website, but I think those autoresponder messages need to be good content. One guy that might be on this call is Glenn Livingston, and he's got this guinea pig site, guineapigsecrets.com. And if you opt into his site, you get like 68 autoresponders over the next year or some ungodly thing. And basically what Glenn has done with that is nobody in their right mind would ever try to go up against them and write that much good content for free. It makes him king of that market. And he's selling a lot of books.
You know, that's a secret that the guy who was worried about return still needs to learn too.
Yeah.
A lot of people get very, very jealous about the information they have. They say, well, I'm not going to tell you that. You got to pay for it. So, and what I've discovered back when I was still selling my copywriting services, is that if I got in front of a guy or on a call with a guy or was at a seminar talking with someone, that I could give away everything I knew. I didn't have to hold back. At first, I thought I needed to hold back. I would say, well, I can't say that. You need to pay me to find out how to do that. I found out that it was much easier for me to not hold back, to not be coy, to not play any games, and just lay it all out there. That's why I'm doing this on this call. I'm not holding anything back.
That's right.
What happens is that people, if they're going to come to me, they're going to come to me anyway and buy my product or whatever. But I'm really out there to teach. That's where I get my jollies. It's a pleasant side stack that I also, can make some money doing there too. But that's a pleasant side stack. My whole career has gotten to the point where I am independent enough and free enough to be able to teach, because that's where I'm really, really happy doing that. Now, the thing that I couldn't predict was going to happen, but that has happened, is that by giving everything away, by giving away content, by letting everything else, essentially just saying everything, I still sell this stuff. Because a lot of people say, well, that's really great, but I can go through all your blogs and I can go through all your, your free newsletters and find transcripts of your talks and seminars and all that stuff. Or I can just buy your course where it's all laid out very, very simply and get all this stuff. But they're not guessing at that point. They're not saying, well, I guess maybe you kind of know what you're talking about. No, they are absolutely convinced. So if they're looking for somebody who knows what they're talking about, that's how you establish yourself as the go-to guy in a market. If you are absolutely fearless about giving out everything you know about doing this stuff, even if, you will sell stuff, even if what you sell is a replication of what you've been giving away for free. It doesn't seem like it should be that way. In most markets, especially information market, it is. Because you know what? When you sign on with me, you get the newsletter too. And the newsletter is it's constantly refreshing the stuff and keeps that things going. And there's a lot more to be said than what I can give away free in an hour or even a 3-hour call like this. There's never enough. A 3-hour call translates to a couple of chapters.
Right. I just had one more little tidbit before we go into the next thing, which is this whole autoresponder thing is also a stick strategy, because what I do with my products is I assume, and it's also true with a white paper or free report or anything, I assume they came, they got it, they intended to read it, the phone rang, they never got back to it. So now I'm just going to take the very, very best parts of every chapter, the really juicy stuff, and I'm going to send it to them in an email, day 2, day 4, day 6, day 10. And so that if they never crack the book, they'll still get the most important stuff in their email, and they'll go, gee, I like this guy. Gee, I would be a real schmuck if I send this back. And it suppresses refunds, and it makes happier customers. As a matter of fact, I had a guy come up to me at a seminar 6 months ago, and he goes, Barry, I'm much your definitive. You had to Google AdWords, and something happened that never happened to me before. I start getting this little trickle of helpful emails to explain all this stuff to me and make it really simple, so that it was like you were trying to make sure that I did my Google stuff right, and I didn't give Google any more money than I had to. And he goes, I really appreciated that. Actually, this was Alan that told me that. You know Alan, right?
Yeah.
And Alan's like a pro in the business. He's been around the block for 20 years, but he had never had that experience, and I really appreciated that. And of course, well, the important thing is he did too. And so it is a refund strategy, refund suppression strategy. Is, hey, just keep giving them some value.
Well, you know what the trick is to being a guru or a teacher, if that's what you want to do. The trick is very simple. I mean, I naturally care about people, and I was helping other writers for years. I would just, they called me up, they were stuck, and they needed something. I just walk them through what they needed to do. And these are my steers. And they called me, and they knew that I wouldn't tell anybody, that they could get the real deals, that it was just that, and I didn't get anything out of it except heartfelt thanks and maybe a favor in a little piggy bank. But I almost never call in my favors. And so when I went out teaching, I just applied that same thing. I knew I was getting something out of that, and I liked doing it. Like I said, the fact that I get money for it just makes it more. It makes it real for me. And it makes it, the fact that I can get paid for being a teacher means that I can continue being a teacher. So I don't just do it for the guys who are in my little inside circle. Instead, I can offer something like Insider Club and go to other people and offer them advice. And it's the key is to really care. It's just, if you're the kind of guy who doesn't care about other people, who doesn't like other people, if you're a real curmudgeon and you really aren't invested, that's not the gig for you. You'll find something else to do. There's lots of things out there to sell and to do things. And there's, most people are not like that. But if you are the kind of guy, that caring will come through. You can't fake it. So for me, I'm not crafting some personality in my blog or my newsletters or anything like that. That's me. That's the easiest writing there is. It's like writing in my diary. I just made the decision. I'm letting these people into my life. I'm going to tell it like it is, and I'm going to treat them with critiques and stuff the way I treat myself. It's the easiest thing in the world. Now, it's still great information. It's stuff you can't get anywhere else. It's stuff you really can't get anywhere else because it comes from me. Nobody can replicate that. I am unreplicatable, except for the fact that people knock off my news. There's an answer. But when it gets right down to it, what the secret thing is me. That's what I bring this. That's what you bring to this as a coaching is you. That's one of the hardest things about this is, trying to clone somebody to take over. I wish I had somebody that could write my newsletter every couple of months. You can't do it, There's a little bit of that, but it's a sweet shackle. It's not an onerous thing. It's just something that, the small commitment that I've made to writing a monthly newsletter, to doing critiques, doing something like that, it's a pleasant thing. It's something I really enjoy and I really like, and I think that comes through. And like I say, it's easy because I'm not hiding, I'm not faking it, I'm not doing anything. And if you can find a niche for yourself, and that includes everybody here on the call, where you can be yourself, then that is marketing nirvana, because it's all going to come through. And all you need then is a market big enough to fund you in the way you need to be funded.
I hope everybody. This is probably one of the most important things that you've said. I hope everybody actually goes when you sit up MP3 to go back and listen to this part, because especially if you're in the information business, even still to a lesser degree, if you're selling a physical product, that this really is more than anything else. This is about you being you. It's about you just sort of getting comfortable with taking the stuff that is so normal to you, that's your thoughts and your personality, your approach to things, and laying it out on the table and letting people participate in it. That is what people are really buying, as much as they're buying whatever you think it is they bought. And in the case of John, John's got all these tricks, all these techniques, all these stories, all of these copywriting methods and everything. But the thing that enables John's students to learn from him effectively is they get to know John. They come to appreciate his idiosyncrasies. They like hearing that same old one-legged golf story for the 14th time because it's a great story and because it's John. They bond with John, and now they have learned how to learn from John, and they keep renewing every year, and that's the business that John does. So John's in the business of waking up, putting on a sweatpants or whatever you wear. For all I know, you walk around the house naked, but it's like
We're doing a clown outfit.
it's that you wake up every day and you say, I get to be me today. And one of the things that me does is me helps other people be them.
Yep, that's a good way to put it. I had a thought there. It'd just be bad for you. What are we on? Like almost 2 hours on the go. Okay, let's move on.
Okay, one guy. This is a great question. He says, I sell retail aftermarket ATV parts and accessories. Most of my product descriptions come straight from the manufacturers. How do you tackle copywriting for retail markets like this? The copywriting model format I see used for info products or one product sites doesn't seem to fit. Thank you for your consideration. That's from Travis Smith.
The all-terrain vehicle he's talking about?
I believe, yeah. All-terrain, yeah. So, yeah, he's selling handlebars, or he's selling mag wheels or exhaust pipes or something, I think. So,
it's just not true. My next, I only have a few clients. One of my clients was the golf guys who are branching out into musical instruments and stuff and training. And I'm about to write an ad just for bass players, with the training video about these guys. And they've also sold actual clubs, the physical elements of playing golf or playing music as opposed to the informational side of it.
So like musical instrument stuff and accessories and it's okay.
Actually, and I retail stuff that could be sold by retail, and I don't change what I do at all. I don't change the way I write at all. What you are selling here's a good lesson to learn. What you are selling is not the product. What you think is your product is not your product. Your product is what your product does for the buyer. So in other words, a lot of people fall in love with the fact that they're selling a seminar. It's like the headline, "My God, the seminar, come on out." Well, nobody wants to go to a seminar. The seminar is not something that's exciting. You have chosen the seminar as the vehicle of bringing the benefit, of making the benefit manifest to the person who's going to come to the seminar. You could have chosen to make it a series of videotapes or an ebook or something like that. You just happen to choose the vehicle of the seminar. So you're not selling a seminar. You're selling what that seminar does for the person. It's the same in retail. You're not selling skis. You're selling what the skis do for the skier who buys them. So once you understand that, then you understand that basic salesmanship is all about hitting that irrational sweet spot deep inside of them about what they want. It's like cars. I keep coming back to cars because basically, if what you want is transportation, so there's no reason to buy a Porsche, or there's no reason to buy a high-end Toyota or Lexus or anything like that, because the low-end, Korean cars, will have everything you want. They'll have air conditioning, and they'll have really comfy seats, and they'll have high crash ratings, and they have all this stuff, and you can get them for $18,000. Why in the world would you spend twice that much? Well, when you start to answer that question, why in the world does someone spend twice as much to get, what do they get in the car when basically they're just sitting in the car and going down the street, going from point A to point B? Then you start to understand the psychology of a customer. And when you're selling ATV things, you're not selling the vehicle, you're not selling the pipes or the nails and stuff. You're selling what those things do for the guy. So it all comes down to benefit. You got to have a better list of benefits than the competition has. That's pretty much it.
Well, so you could conceivably you could write a if not a 6-page sales letter, maybe a 2-page sales letter about the handlebars or something, right?
Oh yeah.
Could you compare that to, say, what if you went and looked at the Sharper Image catalog, or could you talk about other slightly different approaches? I mean, I think the Sharper Image is more similar than different to you. That's my opinion. Could you speak to that?
In fact, the most recent Sharper Image, I'm a big fan of Sharper Image, and it's Jerry. What's his name? Valheimer?
Richard Solheimer.
Yeah, Richard. I'm a big fan of him. And, of course, he was following in the footsteps of none other than Joe Sugarman, who was one of the first to do a bond copy at the one product.
Right.
He started selling, was it ion generators, I think, something like that. Anyway, when I first met Joe at a seminar, and he goes, hi, Jonathan, are you? I said, Joe, listen, I bought one of your ion generators back in 1978. He goes, yeah? I said, yeah, it doesn't work, and I want to know what you're going to do about it. That's my little joke about it. That's a great guy, just a genius. But anyway, if the most recent Sharper Image catalog I saw went back to 1-page ad per product. And I don't know if he was experimenting or if he had gotten out of the thing, because they were starting to put 5, 6, 17 products on a page, and so they can only say a paragraph about it, or something like that. Often when I do, and just I may be going off on a tangent, so you may have to correct me here, sorry, but when you deal with catalog copy with that, if a client comes in, he's got a catalog, I have learned that I can go to him and I go, you have 175 products. He goes, yeah. I go, what? I'll bet you have 3 or 6 that are paying for the entire catalog. And he will pause and he'll say, yeah. And I'll say, I'll bet you have 1 or 2 that is your top seller by a huge amount. He'll say, yeah, it's 1 product. And I say, then why do you have these other 170 products in this? Why aren't you sending out a letter for just that 1 product? Or why aren't you sending out something for just those top 2 products? Bring all this other crap in as a back end or something. And for those that change that paradigm, they are able to sell massive amounts of stuff, much more stuff, because they can target, because then they can write, instead of they have 36-page catalogs for 175 products, they send out one, 4 or 8-page letter on 1 product. And then they bring people in, and then they're off to the races, because they're dealing with former buyers as opposed to cold prospects. However, most people can't do that because in their minds, they're a cataloger. So they're a catalog. How do you have a catalog with 1 product? You don't. Well, what Joe Sugarman did and what Valheimer did is they had the catalog became a collection of 1-page ads on single product, or about that, maybe half-page, something like that. They were able to go to town. Now, when the writing's good, it's not breezy, writing. It's dead solid, right on, direct response, hardcore, get to the sweet spot of the person and do it. Is the Sky Mall, I'm sure everybody here flies, you get Sky Mall catalog in the seat pocket in front of you and on the airplane.
Yep.
They just collect these catalogs, and they say, you get 2 pages in Sky Mall. So these people that have these big catalogs, Eddie Bauer, everybody else, they only get to pick a couple of pages. So they're not picking the dogs; they're picking the best stuff. And often they will go off like the ones that sell the best are the foreign language ones and things like that. And those are like 4 pages long. What is it, Alec? Or what's that? Learn a foreign language or something? Or, no, it's the sales, learn how to sell something. I don't know, it's like a 4-page insert. It's one product. And then you look at the other catalogs there, and there's 15. They try to cram as many products onto the one page, thinking they're going to do that. If they just look at the numbers, they're going to see that only 1 or 2 of those products are carrying the whole page, if at all, if they're selling anything. So the more, it's, again, I don't write long copy because I like long copy. I would love to wake up one day and have the universe change so that I can write 3 paragraphs of cute, clever stuff and it'll sell. That ain't the way it works. I write long copy because that's what it takes to get the sales fix down, and you need to have a complete sales fix down in order to make a sale in most cases.
What do you think about Jay Peterman? And we probably might need to explain what that is for some people.
Oh, from Seisel. So from Jay Peterman catalog, which is he goes off on another tangent. He kind of likes to create luscious landscapes of fiction, around things, imagine yourself on a beach in Bali and things like that. So this is what I was going to bring up before. That I forgot. You said that I train people to expect to have a letter from John in their inbox when they get something from John. So what you see is what you get. You will train your list to respond to how you bring them in. My best example of that is Dr. O'Leary's golf list. Dr. O'Leary's a wacky guy who loves to golf, but he has a wife who doesn't let. This is a real guy. I didn't make this stuff up, but I made it fantasy. It's my voice, but it's really, it's his life channeled through my head. So it's not fiction, but it is a little bigger than life. But this is a real guy, Dr. O'Leary, who's talking, and a golf guy. Even when he knows that a letter's sitting in the mailbox that he's got is from Dr. O'Leary, even though he knows he's going to get pitched on a product, he opens it anyway. We get amazingly high readership on it because what's the prospect, what the guy gets the letter is saying, because he's already bought something and he's on the main mailing list. He's not saying, oh, yuck, another bothersome thing from that O'Leary guy. He's saying, hey, a letter from O'Leary. I wonder what that next case has to say today. I wonder what weird story he's going to tell. And you get to share your passion about golfing with Dr. O'Leary for a few minutes while you're reading the letter and talk about it. And maybe you want the product and maybe you don't. And you just don't care because you get to indulge a little bit. And that's what you can do with your market too, no matter who you are. Once you have a list of going an opt-in market or whatever, you train them to praise what you're writing, to understand it. It can be merely that you're providing content so that when they get an email from you, they jump right on it. Oh my God, it's last time I opened an email with him, he told me how to do blank, and that's, doubled my response or whatever. Or maybe it's just, hey, I wonder what that guy's got to say today. I like that guy, and he never bothers me. He never, he's always got something to say. It's really, really easy reading. My newsletters get high readership too, because people, I can't tell you how many people come up to me, top marketers, and they say yours is the only newsletter I read. And that's the biggest compliment I can get, because I know that they have 15 newsletters that they're comped on, they're paying for. They're getting all the top newsletters. And all I've ever wanted is a chance to get in people's heads and have that conversation. I write the thing anyway, but it's really gratifying to know that people are listening to me at the same time. By the way, I don't sell in my newsletters. It's all content.
Yes.
If I do sell, I'll add another letter in the package that goes out. And now I'll just tell them I'm pitching it, and they know the newsletter's here, so I don't get here's another pitch from Carlton. I wonder what he's got to say today. Oh, it's a newsletter. Oh, look, he's got something else going on here. You don't get that reaction.
Right. Well, it's a time about content. Here's a question from Mark Ingalls. He says, it seems like most of the copywriting samples are for information products like videos or ebooks. Most of your advice about bullets is to make them blind. That doesn't work for tangible product. Besides the listing features and turning them into benefits, do you have any suggestions for making killer bullets?
That's just silly, Ferry. You can't do blind bullet. Of course you can do a blind bullet. A blind bullet is merely alluding to the feature with a tangible benefit and not telling them what the feature is. You got to get the product to understand what the feature is. Now, if you're selling a nail, how many parts of the nail are there? There's the head, the shaft, and the point. I've had it, and then the steel factor or something. So, the features would be it's not a you can hit it with a block of cement or something that won't stand or so. I don't know, whatever these manifests of the same are, but you got to make some manifests in the person's head. You got to understand why people are buying nails and what it is about nails that they want, what it is about nails they don't like from other nails, and what positions you uniquely in the in the prospect's mind in order to sell this stuff.
No, you have this sort of I don't know, it's like a 3-part formula that you see in your bullets a lot.
I call it the two-fisted approach, and it's called the 1-2 punch, actually.
Okay.
Here's this. I like, and these are with, actually, I guess I do it with non-keys, but most of my bullets are keys. They're blind. I'll tell you what the benefit is, but you got to get the product to find out what it is that gives you that benefit. I want to create, and that's creating the itch. That's the teasing the blindness of the bullet, create the itch where they have to get the product to find out what's going on. I will also use bullets where I give away information. 5 ways to do this, and then in parentheses, number 2, you're going to wash your socks every day so you don't get athlete's foot when you're touring Europe. Number 4, and you're going to blah blah blah, and actually give them tips. Skipping number 3, number 1, and number 5. Okay. So when you're giving these, the 1-2 punch of writing a bullet, most people do a 1-punch bullet. They'll say, why having this product lets you blank, essentially, and that's pretty much your standard bullet, or how to blank when or just how to blank, if it's an information product. If it's a real product like nails,
This is made out of some special steel alloy, and it doesn't break off.
So when I talk about the 1-2 punch, I talk about delivering a good benefit, but then I always come up with a alternative benefit, even an incongruous benefit. Like if I'm talking, I might try to bring in spec in the nail. I mean, I may not do it, but I'll try to do it. I'll say, it's not only these nails, the most effective things you are, but they're just gorgeous little things that, you've never seen a sexy nail before until you've held one of these puppies in your hand. And that's an example of a 1-2 punch. You come at them with the benefit, with the kind of expected, but then you come at them from out of left field with another tangible benefit that they might smile when they read it, but they're not going to disagree with you.
Well, sometimes that is what nudges people over the edge. They're like, well, these 15 different kinds of nails, and these ones have the slender, sexy, phallic machining on them or something.
That's absolutely true. Or you can bring in the whole thing of, if I was doing nails, I might bring in something that nobody else doing nails would talk about, which is what your coworkers think about you. Hey, we know the beauty about being able to hit the thing sideways and still have it going straight. You're going to be ahead of everybody else, and you're going to be the go-to guy, when it comes to building stuff. You're going to get calls before everybody else. You're going to rise to the top of the list on the union, and your buddies are going to hate you because you're going to be known as the nail guy. And that's a benefit that nobody else would think about or bring in. And you think that's part of the 1-2 punch. Bring in something from left field that nevertheless is relevant that you wouldn't have thought of.
Yes, it does. It does. Okay, I got another one. Let's talk about women. Hi, John. I'm selling a women's cosmetic product. It's a unique Hawaiian facial oil created out of 100 natural oils, reduces liver spots, clears up crow's feet, and wrinkles naturally. My target is baby boomer women, elderly women and men, women smokers, because smoking ages skin quicker. Can you give me some tips on how to think like my target market so I can write sales copy for them? And basically, he's asking a bunch of questions here. This is Welton, Dakota. He's asking a bunch of questions about.
Are you sure this is a guy?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know the guy. So it's a man. He's got to write to women. He's got to sell this this special cosmetic product, and he's wondering, okay, how are women different? And
Okay. For rookies, it generally don't try to get fancy. Women are not all that much different than men when it comes down to buying stuff. In the advanced version, it's night and day. Women have to be approached in an entirely different way. So for a rookie, just try to get your basic sales pitch down. Say what you got, why it's good, what's going on. When you're really going to get into world-class writing, you're going to start to understand the psychology that goes on. And women are a different breed than men. Men make a huge mistake when they write to women. To really, really overgeneralize. Men tend to focus on the features of the product, the heft, the weight, the size, the way it feels, all this physical stuff. Women tend to focus on the benefit side of it. Sometimes with rookie women copywriters, you got this. You are immersed in a warm bath of emotion of reading about this, but you can't tell what the product is. You don't have any idea what the physical dimensions of the product are. And with men, they won't tell you any of the benefits. So watching the Trump show, the Apprentice, I think right now it's still the men against the women, and they had to do. You watch that show, Barry?
I'm sorry, somebody gave me a piece of paper. Can you let's the show again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, the Trump show, The Apprentice.
Oh yeah, I watched the first season.
Okay, well,
and it was fascinating.
Yeah, this season is men against women. I think that's their name. It's Martha Stewart. Anyway, the point is, they had to do some advertising things and stuff, and they approached it totally different ways. They had to sell a Maserati, I think it was. And the men just went totally feature. The car, look at it, and then it's great. And the women went totally benefit, how it felt, how it did everything. And the women just crushed the men. I mean, it was just ridiculous. But if the women kind of went a little overboard on the emotional aspect side, I thought. But again, you have to understand who's going to buy. When you're approaching women, boy, this is like a whole call, really. But if you're a guy trying to sell to women, you better get hip to how women think, and you better start hanging out with them. And I don't mean just your wife. I mean, you better start talking to them and finding out what's going on. My first recommendation, I actually made this to a client who's going to a woman market who was kind of clueless about selling to women. Go and buy every single woman's magazine out there and subscribe to it. Because of all of the Red Book, all of the start reading this stuff. And just very shortly, I mean, read the articles, read everything, read the ads too, but read the articles especially. You will find that the blurbs on the front cover of especially Cosmopolitan, 10 ways to drive him wild at bed. When you get to the story, often there will be nothing about sex in this thing. And a guy will just scratch his head and say, what the heck was that all about? Won't even understand. I was just watching the Today Show or Good Morning America. I never watched that 'cause I'm never up. But for another reason, I will discuss now. I was up this morning taking care of the business with one of the dogs. And I happened to be watching Good Morning America just for the heck of it. And this show is like 80% aimed at women. And for me, the blurbs that they had that make you keep coming back after each commercial break were pretty good. I mean, they're a hook. And I kept thinking, I got to see what the heck's going to go on there. But the stories didn't satisfy me at any level. And that's because they were going after women. And this is no secret. There was a big, there's a book out now about the battle between Good Morning America and Today. I think one Katie Couric and the other is, I don't care. It doesn't matter, but there's this ratings battle going on. And in this book, one of the interesting things that I came up with was the job of the weathermen. I think one is Al Roker, and I don't know who the other guy was. And the producers of the show say this is no secret. His job is not to tell you what the weather is. His job is to be the likable goose next door who talks to you about the weather and what a great day is going to be. So the detail, the actual degree temperature, the how much chance of rain, things like that are much less important than the fact that he goes, oh, you're going to want your slickers today because you're going to go out there. It's going to be a little damp, and it's that kind of talking. That's much more important than a simple recitation of the facts of the matter. The emotional content of the delivery is everything.
So women want to be reassured that the weather's going to be okay, and guys want to know what the weather's actually going to be. So this is why every time my wife complains to me about something, that I give her this logical problem-solving thing, she always gets mad at me.
Yeah.
Is that kind of the idea?
So, also, what's the classy thing that women just say about women bringing up them? They come home and they complain about a coworker, or something that happened. And a man's natural thing is to try to fix it. And it's not that he's doing it with her. He does it with himself and with everybody. It's like, oh, well, you know what you should do? And she will, they now know after years of Oprah and Todd Paulin to put up their hand and say, no, I don't want you to fix it. I want you to listen.
Yeah.
So all they want to do is be listened to. Now, so a lot of products, a good infomercial to watch is the Victoria Principal skincare commercials on TV. Have you seen those back out? I think Dan has something to do with
yeah, I know that. Yeah, right.
Huh?
Yeah, Dan definitely had some role in those.
Yeah. Well, the back again. She was also on. I just noticed that she was back on. I think she even has whole segments on one of these shopping channels. Watch that. Watch what they do. A lot of the show was the same as the Richard Simmons diet show, which was not about the details of dieting. And with Victoria Principal, it's not about the details of the scientific stuff. It's about the result. It's about women bursting into tears because after all these years of feeling they were the only one that had splotchy skin, that suddenly all these sisters and arms come out and they have a solution and they feel so much better about themselves and all this stuff. And it's not very gloomy. It goes on for hours. Watch the home shopping network. One of the things that kind of creeps me out about it, I've met several guys who were top producers over in Europe and here in the States. The guys that they just go on it for an hour, they sell something, they sell everything they had. But they take, the regular people on TVT and stuff, the shopping channel, will take call as their sisters are selling jewelry. And it's like, hi, it's Maud from Tennessee, and it's just, there's no reason for that. It's not earth, it's sort of a testimony, but it's not. And what I bring away from it is like, why are these people buying so much jewelry? What's going on here? And what's going on is it has nothing to do with the jewelry. They're never going to get a chance to wear most of this stuff. And what's going on is a kind of bonding thing that's happening. They want to, they're lonely. They want somebody to listen to them. They want somebody to talk to. They want some things going on. One of the biggest breakdowns in society, and as a good marketer, you are part of the culture. Our culture is very fragmented. One of the biggest breakdowns is in the breakdown of small community, of people being able to, people don't even know their neighbors, let alone a lot of people in town. I mean, it's an interesting fact. I went from a small college, small community college for 2 years to a very large university to finish my education. And I went from having classes of 5 to 15 people to my first class at UC Davis with 500 people. And the interesting thing I realized is that in a small school, I knew almost everybody. In the large school, I knew almost nobody. Very, very small numbers. So as the culture starts to fragment into these larger and larger bunches of things, the intimate connection that we crave as human beings is breaking down. And marketing, I mean, that's your in for a lot of things. Again, getting back to that, talking to the accountants, and sharing the passion. That's your in, is you can be part of that connective tissue that people crave so much. That bonding process becomes easier when you realize that what you're doing is providing a missing part to their soul. I mean, imagine a person laboring in a town where he's the only accountant in town or the only, civil engineer or whatever. He can't talk to anybody about it. And here you come, and you're not only going to show him how to make his life better and do all this stuff better, but you're going to give him a chance to feel part of this wider world. You're going to give him entry into, you're an insider. You're the go-to guy in the industry, and he's actually going to get to know what's going on and know, be able to stand his pleasure in doing it. and indulge in it a lot more. That's very, very important. And the sociological aspect of marketing.
Well, I think that is a um, big reason why niche marketing is so important now, because like I always like to joke that, this is a day and age where literally you don't talk to your next door neighbor for 3 months, but you email your old buddy who lives in South Africa twice a week.
Right.
And the world has reorganized around all these little interests. And so I don't even like going to parties because all these people, like, I can't even explain to them what I do. What do you do? Well, I'm a consultant. It's like, well, the people.
I make up stories.
Yeah, right. And so, yeah, you're creating communities that didn't exist before. They're just completely different kind of community now. So yeah, you're totally on the money. Hey, there's one question I wanted to mention because I actually have a resource for it. And the guy, Graham English says he's got this really interesting course on how to get perfect hits, actually. But he says, do you have any good examples of great copy in the music industry? And I just want to mention the teleseminar we did last year, which is at perrymarshall.com/copywriting. If he goes and opts in for that, I've got some kind of guitar letter you wrote.
Oh, yeah.
Which he can look at. Is there anything you want to say about that in particular that people would think it was interesting or illustrative?
No, but he's doing Perfect Pitch. This is a guy doing a double truck ad on Perfect Pitch for years. I don't know if this is the same guy. In the music mag, he's been in every issue of Guitar Player, I think, for 15 years or something now. And
Really?
it's all about having perfect pitch, and it's a long copy ad. It's interesting. Over the years, he went from being kind of basic to having more and more graphics. And I think he's starting to drop copy, and it may have burned out. He may not be in there anymore. But he just hit it's something that a lot of musicians are very, very excited about and need to learn and don't learn from anybody else. And I don't, like I said, I haven't looked at these mags in a long time, but he's got some competition out there, but that's good. When you go into somewhere, you see somebody's been dominating the market for many, many years. It's not a time to get nervous and say, I can't go in there, unless you look at what they're doing and you say, I can't compete. But there's almost always a part of the niche, with the music niche, and then the people who want perfect pitch within that. There's a niche to that people who are buying this other guy's perfect pitch product that isn't being met, probably because the guy. One of the first things you can do, that I do when I go to a client who's dominating a market, is I say, have you knocked yourself off yet? And they'll generally say, well, what do you mean? And I'll say, well, if you don't, someone else will. And they'll come up with a cheaper product, a less fancy product or whatever. So if you've got a product worth $1,000 and it comes in a fancy box and it's got all this great stuff, knock yourself off and create another business that offers a 199 version installer your product. Because a lot of people that can't afford or don't want to pay $1,000 still want what you have. And if you don't do it, somebody else is going to do it.
Right.
And but the other way to look at it is just the niche. If you're going to a certain market and you've been dominating for a while, you're probably pretty lazy about it. A lot of marketers I know are dominating markets. They're not interested in the fast ends. They're not interested in expanding the number of people they can bring in because they're making more money than they can count right now. So there's like little niches in there. Maybe you're not going to make as much money as the guy who's dominating the market, but you can come in there. You can be easier. You can be faster. You can have more personality. You can be cheaper. Did I say that? All these things that he's not doing can create a niche for you in a market that he's already softened up for you.
That is absolutely true. As a matter of fact, I think one of the things that I teach all this Google AdWords stuff, but one of the things that I'm not sure it's really in my book that I talk about in advanced stuff is if you type any keyword, like if you typed in perfect pitch on Google and you looked at all the different ads, you really, if you're going to be in that market, you should ask yourself, okay, just even looking at the Google ads, what are the different things that are being said? If I can see 10 different ads here, every one of them says something different. So what's not being said? And there's always something that's not being said.
that people, Jim Edwards and I did this little exercise where we figured out that people wanted a potty training book for Chihuahuas. If you typed in Chihuahuas or Chihuahua training or anything like that, there was nothing about potty training. When we started testing it, we found out a lot of people were very interested in that. And you would never know unless you talked to people who owned Chihuahuas and listened to them complain about stuff. And nobody selling Chihuahua stuff had ever tapped into that. So it was a fresh, new market. It was very interesting. I got a couple more questions here. We're definitely winding down. I'm starting to lose my voice. So I've got a few more questions. Yeah. So I'm gonna. Okay. Somebody asked about using a sales letter generator software program. Do you have any opinion about that? What is it again? Her name is Nicole Cangrass, and she there's a software program called Sales Letter Generator. Oh, where it's kind of a fill in the blank kind of a thing, and software right to fill it. Do you have an opinion about tools like that? Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like. Let me think of the most humiliating example I can think of that would shame this person before you even find something like that. It's kind of like trying to break things down to a common denominator that really doesn't exist. I mean, you can use sales letters as templates, but when you this stuff, I don't know. I just say it's possible. Somebody came up with a novel generator too, where you plug in a few things and they'll write the novel for you. And it's like, come on. It's just you're always, there's no such thing as pure machine generated stuff. It's always going to come from somebody's mind. So somebody's putting in the basic stuff that's going to, make up the bulk of what the sales pitch is. So what you're doing basically with a sales generator is you're taking some existing sales pitch and then slamming your stuff into it. Once you know that you can take, that you can get a swipe file together and start looking at multiple things, that's easy enough to do. It's a headline. Oh, okay, this guy's got free benefits in the headline. He's appealing to the person need to do something or make more money or be younger or do something, whatever it is your product does, or have more fun. And so, so then I'll make a headline like that, and then it looks like in the opening paragraph he's appealing to the guy's sense of whatever, and I'll appeal to that too, and do that, and I'll copy some of the stuff, and that's how you generally use a swipe file. So, starting to generate, I don't know, I've never heard of anybody writing one from a generator that worked. If anybody has information on that, let me know. But the sales pitch is a conversation between two people. It's you and the person reading. It's not you and your market. It's not you and everybody on your list. It's you and the one person. It's you and just having a face-to-face conversation with one person. You're just multiplying that conversation out through everybody on the list. So that's it. I mean, it's just, you can have a dress yourself in the morning, kind of generator thing where you plug in, you say, I'm going to work today, and it'll say, okay, here's how you're going to dress. Use this tie, that. Then, maybe if you write stuff, but, it's like, once you know how to dress yourself, I mean, you don't need to know. It's okay. Good answer. Glenn Livingston asked, and I'm not totally sure I understand the question, but we'll try to flesh it out. He said, how you might transform copy to remove social euphemism instead of emphasizing the law of the jungle. I think what he means is, how do you get away from saying really cliche, ordinary kind of stuff, and get to the actual jugular of the person you're writing to? Like maybe an example is, like, everybody in the world who's trying to sell software to a business is gonna start babbling some tripe about, we're here to maximize your ROI or something. Sorry. Okay, so how do you break out of this, think and talk like everybody else and say something original? Yes. Well, first of all, forget about saying something original. The word original should never come into advertising anyway.
Okay.
No matter what Schwartz said about it, what he meant was don't be boring. So if you're talking about being original as opposed to being boring, that's fine. If you're talking about being original just for the sake of being original, forget that. What you want to do is have a conversation with the guys. What these other people are doing in all the other ads that are out there in most markets is they're having the conversation they want to have, and it's not even really a conversation. They're like, they're just kind of laying some stuff out there. If you can, you need to bond. You need to just sit down with a guy who's raised his hand and said, I'm a little bit interested in this. What do you got to say? And then you got to be able to talk to him for a while to fake. If you're doing lead generation, it's a little easier because you're just asking them not to send you money. You're asking them just to sign up or something. If you're asking for money, though, it's the same as sitting down face to face and telling the guy, blah, 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 take out your checkbook and write a check for me right now. Think about what that takes. And you got to have credibility. You got to believe what you're saying. You've got to tickle his sweet spot with enough outrageousness where he's willing to overcome his natural reluctance to write a check to somebody he didn't know 5 minutes before. All of these things come into play. So as far as coming up with the original thing, it will come naturally to you when you understand your market, what the market wants, and how to bond with it, how to have that conversation with one guy in the market, sell him, and just multiply that times the rest of the market. So understanding who you're selling to and why they would buy if they did buy, or understanding why people buy, why they don't buy, and then constructing your sales pitch so that you counter all the objections to not buying and keep focusing on why they should buy, then you're off to the race.
Okay. I got a question from Maceo Jordan. He says he's got a short 9-day deadline. He said, what advice can you give regarding the research process for a project? Organizing the ideas, benefits, features to brainstorm a good hook.
Right. I happen to know Maceo. His inner salesman is wide awake. He critiques several of his letters, and he makes some mistakes that we all make. He doesn't make any mistakes that even veteran writers don't make. Basically, he's got to back up. He should know by now how long it's going to take him to actually write the letter. And for me, I can't write for much more than 2 or 3 hours. And at most, I'm going to produce 2 to 4 pages of copy. That's at most, probably closer to 2, and sometimes not even 2. And that's just getting the basic letter down. So if I know if I'm going to write an 8-page letter, it's going to take me 4 days or so. Now, I can knock out letters a lot faster. In fact, for some markets, like the golf market where I'm writing my 1,000th and 13th letter, I can just sit down and bang it out. And in 2 hours, I can get an 8-page letter out or something. But that's rare. That's because I know that market so well because I've written so much. So with the new market, you may need more time. You may need 8 days to write the letter, so you haven't got that much time to get the research done. So you've got to know where you can shortcut, if you feel you're pressed for time. Basically, what you want to do is sit down, to have a long talk with the best guys you can find who you believe can uncover the major motivations or the major benefits or the major things that are going to trigger a sale. So talk to the guys who make the product, talk to salesmen in the street who actually deal with people, talk to people who deal with complaints on the phone, talk with whoever you can. Spend a day just gathering information, getting all this stuff done, reading stuff critically, not just plowing through it. You have to give yourself permission to stop reading a brochure or something if it's bullshit, for example. Just say, that ain't going to work. And toss that. Get some stuff. Start circling stuff, making some notes. Get your benefits down, your list of benefits. From the list of benefits, you're going to be able to craft your USP, which is uniquely positioning yourself in the market and the prospect's mind for a sale. Once you have that, your top 3 benefits are probably, list them in order. Your top 3 are probably going to go in the headline or somewhere up top. You're going to keep hammering on those things. You're going to have some broad benefits. You're going to have some specific benefits. You're going to try to deal with all these things. Then, write the bullets down, because often writing the benefits help you craft the USP. Writing the bullets help you craft the way you're going to construct the sales pitch, because what you're going to talk about is ways to get to understanding how these bullets are going to solve your dilemma or help your life or do whatever he's doing in your business. And then you got to get all riled up and sit down and write, just kind of bomb it forth on the page, get it out there. Aim for an 8-page letter or a 4-page or whatever. I generally don't find that after years and years of writing that I need at least 8 pages to have a complete sales pitch. Often for like 12, can go up to 20. I don't like to go much over 12 though. But that's because I think of the sales conversation I've got to have. And, you can go overboard. You can go underboard. You try to find that perfect place. And it's around 8 to 12 pages of written copy. Unless it's a real simple thing. If I'm selling nails, I don't need much more than 2 or 4 pages. But anyway, once you understand what you're going to do and the kind of way you're going to approach this, then sit down and just have that conversation with the guy, armed with what you know. It's like, hey, I'm Bob. If you're interested in doing X, I have a way for you to do it half the time, getting twice the benefits and blah, 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 whatever the top 3 or 5 things are. And then here's what this is all about. Tell them what this is about. I make my living helping people just like you do this thing. You may not have heard of me because I'm only used by the top people and it costs a lot. However, right now, and then give them a reason why you're talking to them now. Give them a reason why this offer is here now. Give them a reason why this is a limited offer. Start applying the emergency and start covering all the points of the basic sales pitch. And then get that out. Just get it out as fast as you can and then go back and edit. I would plan for spending like 4 days editing. Just going back and trying to get cold on the pitch and start, I would, even if I only had 2 days or 1 day of editing, that would be the most important day. Go back and make sure I've covered all the points. Read it as cold as I can, as a reader would, not as a writer would. And say, okay, I'm bored here. I need to cross this out, or this is off of the tangent, get rid of the tangent, or I need to make this point again, or make me think stronger and start to see stuff. That's the best way to do it.
Okay. That's very good. I'm going to give you...
I'm burned out, Perry. I'm starting to lose my voice here. One wrap-up.
We got one last question, then we're done. And this is an easy one, but it's important. This is actually Lori Morgan Ferrero. She wants to know what's the day in the... And I know that you're as disciplined as a drill sergeant. And so we all want to know what's a day in the life of John and how do you manage your copywriting time?
Well, I've been struggling over the years to be able to do what a lot of the writers that I admire, such as Gary Benjaminka, do, which is get up early, sit down, and write, and just have 2 hours of writing or 3 hours of writing before they do anything else. They're not answering email. They probably eat, have a cup of coffee, and then go get right to it. If they're working home or they go to the office. I like to work at home, so I'm often working in my pajamas. I haven't been able to do that. And it's probably just a matter of discipline. I could if I had to. Classically, I'm a night owl. And I've done my best work at night. Even in college, I didn't crack a book before 11 o'clock at night. I wouldn't study all night, but I'd study through until 2 or 3 in the morning and then crash. It's the way my metabolism works. And so that means that I'm not getting a lot of stuff done during the day. Well, I have also found that just deadlines have a way of forcing you, especially as a professional, to work just under the conditions you have. So I do wake up in the morning sometimes. My deadline's at noon, and I know I have some stuff to do. I'll get up as early as 6 o'clock and start writing and work on this stuff. And I think, God, if I could just do this regularly, especially in the summer, I could get up and work for a couple hours and have the rest of the day to myself. And it makes a lot of sense. It's just something that I, have rarely been able to get into a routine. I do have my routines, though. Right now I have an assistant that comes in for a couple of hours every day. I don't have an incoming phone line, so I don't have to take calls. So I'm dealing with a lot of emails. I'm dealing with issues. And because I deal with international stuff, I'm dealing with people on all kinds of different timelines. So at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, my time, it's the end of the day back east. So I've got to keep that in mind. And I've got a lot of paperwork stuff to do. So a lot of it's really boring. A perfect day that I would like to have is to get up at a decent hour. And to me, a decent hour is like 9. And being a night owl, if I'm up till 3 or 4 in the morning, then that's not very reasonable. But I'd like to get up And before I do anything else, sit down and get a couple of hours of writing, and good, solid writing, undistracted, phone off the hook, door closed, everybody in the house respecting my time. Get that done, and then I could relax and start to take care of another couple of hours of like housekeeping, paying bills, taking care of vendors, working on the website, answering emails, taking care of all this other stuff. And kind of, I haven't really ever worked well within an 8-hour day or a 10-hour day or anything like that. It's just, I like to take off a lot of time. I'm working a lot more than I did at the height of my freelance career, which I was only working about 10 or 20 hours a week. And I was able to take off 3 to 6 months a year. And when I took on this teaching gig, I knew I was going to have to give that up. And I was just ready to do that because, like I said, I like teaching. I enjoy what I'm doing. But I now am committed monthly to a newsletter. I'm committed to, doing the critiques. I'm committed to speaking at seminars, sometimes monthly.
3-hour conference calls.
And conference calls like this and really things. So that's fine. I mean, I gave myself a year to do this. I'm on year 4. I'm still having fun. I occasionally fall off the horse and take on too much, and I got to dig myself out of a hole and do things. But I've been through this for, I've been a professional freelance copywriter working out of my house for 25 years. I know pretty much how things work, so I don't resent the fact that I've got a deadline tomorrow and I kind of screwed around all day and it's 6 o'clock in the evening and I've got to sit down and do some writing. So I don't get to watch Monday Night Football, have a beer, and go to bed. I got to stay, kind of focused and get riled up and go in and write, for a couple of hours tonight, do something like that. I don't resent that, but if I could be more disciplined, I would. And as I get older, I might get more disciplined. And since one of my goals is to write fiction, which is totally different. I've got a couple of novels, actually 3 novels sit there that need just a few final touches before I ship them off. If I could get up and do my business side in a couple of hours, get some other stuff done, that's the beauty of working for yourself. You are in charge of your routine. That's the beauty. That's also the danger. Because when a guy like me is in charge of my routine, it's a fact. So I don't have, but I could really work it out. I could have a couple hours where I'm getting business stuff done, then a couple hours of writing on the novel, a couple hours taking care of business, and I'm done. It's still early afternoon, and I got the rest of the day to do whatever I please. And by God, you need Miller time, especially when you're in heavy, intensive businesses like we are. You and I need our Miller time, and whatever that Miller time is for us, it could be going down to the watering hole and getting roaring drunk and going and howling at the moon, or it could be going bowling, or it could be just going shopping for something, or it could be watching TV, although that's a bad one. But it's whatever recharges your soul and refuels you. You need that. Otherwise, you're going to burn out. One of the things I talk about mostly with rookie writers who go out as freelancers is to avoid burnout. And the way to do that is to keep your interest tight and not start squeezing those adrenaline glands inside your head so often and so hard and so urgently because you're always behind and overwhelmed that you start to hate life. If you're waking up in the morning and you're not eager to get after it, then you're on the road to burnout. Just no matter what you're doing, you gotta love it. And I know that's kind of silly. People talk about follow your bliss and stuff. So you could be getting up and going and managing a string of restaurants, and maybe you hate restaurants now. Maybe you should start thinking about getting out of it. But there are ways, even when you're in a situation like that, where there are ways to make it fun. There are ways to start thinking. And one of the ways to make it fun again is to have an exit strategy if you want to get out, so that you have a light at the end of the tunnel. And now everything you're doing today, especially those 2 hours before you go into work where you're going to have to do something maybe you don't especially want to do, but for those 2 hours, you're going to spend it planning for doing something that you do want to do. Maybe starting that new business, that new info business, getting that website up, seeing what's going on. You always have something in it to feed your soul. Stay connected. That's why I still play music. Over the weekend, I just jammed with a guy. We're talking about putting together a little old guy band. All the semi-famous musicians here in northern Nevada who are over 45 years old. And there's a lot of them, and just get together and playing once in a while, rent the places, doing it. It's just be fun, and there'd be no stress. And it's not like we want to go on tour or get a record contract. We just want to play some fun. And that's the kind of thing where I sit down with a friend and we sit down and play. 4 hours goes by in a blink. that's when you know you're having fun. When you look at it and go, my God, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we started the day. I can't believe we just, shot 4 hours. It was so much fun.
That's right on.
Very important.
Right on. Hey, I'm going to let you go. That was excellent. And again, we're gonna send out recordings to everybody. I really appreciate it, John. This was great. There was a few questions that I think deserve to get answered. That some of them really are for me, not for you, or whatever. And I'll get out to answer those. But this was excellent, and I really appreciate your time today.
Terry, as always, it's a pleasure talking with you. Always glad to help, and I hope hope people got help out of this. And they know what my blog is and stuff like that.
John-Carlton.com, right?
Right.
Well, go to it. There's a great blog. I know a lot of them don't know. So
okay, John dash you need the dash, or otherwise you're going to wind up at a woodworker's ISIS from Boston. Carlton.com, and I haven't posted in a few days, but I generally post like twice a week or so and get it on there. And the archives are very worthwhile to go through, and I always welcome comments. So anyway, it was great, Perry. I'm going to hang up because I think I got about 5 more words left in my voice on my throat closes.
Hey, thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.